Introduction to the 5,000 Years of Saibo Immortal Cultivation. Starting from the sudden rise of black air in the Three Qing Dynasty portraits, the repeated cracking of sculptures inside the temple, the migration of stars, the decline of all things, and the brink of collapse in modern society, according to the calculation of contemporary celestial masters, the Great Road has changed 5,000 years later. Carrying the wish of the present, Ziche, a disciple of Dongxiao Palace, beheaded 5,000 years of blessings and went to the future to explore the secrets of upheaval. Interstellar colonization, the Empire of Immortals, the Five Thunder Cannon, the mysterious Mother Star Gate, the Star River Formation, the return of 10,000 ships to the Sect, the Outer Immortal Mountain, and the Dragon Roaring Star Sea. The Milky Way has long become the footstool of cultivators, and the development of biotechnology and materials science to the extreme assists cultivators in dominating the world. But with the stagnation of border expansion, external conquest has turned into internal oppression, financial monopoly, spiritual root transplantation, memory input, and physical modification have further widened the class gap. The generation and monopoly of cutting-edge technology have completely lost the power of the rebels to turn the waves, and the grassroots scattered cultivators are addicted to the virtual Yuqing illusion. And the Taoist from 50 years ago, step by step in this future cultivation world, explores the root cause of the changes in the heavenly way and corrects the wrong path of immortality. Chapter 1. Go here. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Linen, at the foot of Dotty Mountain. Two elderly men with white beards were walking on the street, dressed in old cotton coats and holding a curled dust brush in their hands. The old blue bus drove on the yellow dirt road that had not rained for a few days, raising flying dust in the sky. The sunlight shone through the swirling dust, casting a murky and uncertain light. The old man was choked and quickly took a few steps to get rid of the yellow dust behind him. Looking back at the bus that was the culprit, I only saw an empty scene through the glass, so I turned my head and let out a deep sigh. The chaos has been going on for some time, and most of the people have grabbed supplies and hid at home. Only some bus drivers and sanitation workers are still working outside numbly, as if this can make everything look good. At first, all of this was just a strange phenomenon in the Taoist temple, such as the sudden rise of black mist in the Sanqing portrait, the inexplicable fragmentation of sculptures in the temple, the restlessness of the disciples, and the nightmare awakening of the heavenly master of Longhu Mountain. In the later years, there were star system anomalies, frequent natural disasters, plants withering and yellowing, animals dying on the streets, abnormal tides, frequent earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, typhoons and tsunamis constantly sweeping coastal areas. Experts have proposed one reason after another, but they have been overturned one by one, and in the end, they are at a loss. No one knows what happened, and no one knows what the future will be like. Until now, most factories have been temporarily closed, and people are hiding at home, facing disasters that may happen at an unknown time. The people's livelihood is difficult. The old man sighed and wrapped his coat tightly. The weather was getting colder and colder. The other old man didn't respond, just said, "Go up the mountain." 300 years ago, this was the bustling Taoist temple. Dongxiao Palace. Built in the early Han Dynasty, it has a history of over 1,000 years and was ultimately destroyed by a large fire during the Qianlong period. A few years ago, there was an unlucky scenic area developer who wanted to rebuild this place, but only half of it was done and they ran out of money, leaving behind a pile of semi-finished scenic area plans. Recently, a garbage station has been built at the foot of the mountain, and the people around them have almost walked. However, there are still hermits living on the mountain, or in other words, it is precisely because of the sparse population that hermits are here. The two elderly people came here to visit the hermits here. Passing through the yellow mud and gravel road in front of the garbage dump, following the abandoned scenic corridor and delving deep into the mountains, the ancient small village has long been deserted, and the desolate grass covers the 81 caves of Dotty Mountain. Suddenly, a bell rang in the mountains. Startled up a flock of mountain birds. Gulyalu. Hot water with steam fell into a white porcelain teacup, and the emerald green new tea was full of ups and downs. The old Taoist picked up half a sandalwood stick, shook his sleeve, and inserted it beside the table. It's rare for a few colleagues from the Heavenly Master's mansion to have time to visit my humble abode in the mountains and fields. The old Taoist sat behind the table, picked up his tea, and blew a sigh, adding stress to the words in the Heavenly Master's mansion. Shame, shame, an old man apologized and said, they came here to ask for help, so they had to respond to the thorn in their words. Senior Qingshu, idle clouds and wild cranes, I dare not disturb you, but it concerns all the people of the world. I have to take the liberty of seeking. The old Taoist glanced at them and said, a few days ago, you held a Taoist conference. I heard about it. It seems that you have come up with something to discuss, but it still concerns the old Taoist. The two of them exchanged a glance and awkwardly said, exactly. It's just that it's not about the senior, but about the senior's disciples. Gu Ziche. Are you looking for him? The old Taoist was a bit surprised, but suddenly felt it was taken for granted. Let's talk about it first. What did you come up with? The younger generation dares to try their words. The old man arched his hand and said, in the conference, all the predecessors worked together to calculate and ultimately came to the conclusion that the cause of the great calamity of heaven and earth is 5,000 years later. Wait a minute. Qingshu interrupted his narration directly. The cause is 5,000 years later. How could this be? If something in the future leads to the destruction of the past, why is there a future when the past is destroyed? This is completely a big grandfather paradox. The future event killed everyone's grandfather. The old man's face darkened and he said, I know it too, but this is the result of the joint calculation of the predecessors. There is only this result, although it is absurd, we don't have a second answer to believe. Qingshu frowned and said, let's leave this aside for now. Let's assume it's caused by events 5,000 years later. So how do you solve it? The old man earnestly looked at Qingshu and arched his hand, saying, there is a method in my Heavenly Master's way that can emulate the sages entering and exiting nature, advancing and retreating from ancient and modern times, or even after walking for 5,000 years. However, the method is easy to obtain and difficult for the sage to seek, so. Have you been interested in Ziche's 50-100-year fortune? Qingshu asked bluntly. Yes. Although the venerable disciple is not a saint, he has been blessed for 5,000 years. There is already a consensus in the religion that it is probably the reincarnation of virtuous people like Yao, Shan, and you, who can achieve success with the help of the sage's blessings. Qingshu frowned and said, I also have some knowledge of the Wangji Guanwu Fa, but the sage fuse is not a saint after all. If you practice this method, whether it can be achieved or not, I'm afraid all the fuse will be cut off for 5,000 years. The old man Chen earnestly said, indeed, as we all know in our teachings, the cost of this method is quite high. However, after more than 40 days of discussion among our predecessors, this solution is the only one. We earnestly request that you, Master Qingshu, and your esteemed disciples, take the world as your consideration and try your best. After pondering for a long time, Qingshu let out a slight sigh and said, I can't make a decision on behalf of Ziche. You'd better personally tell him about it. This is nature, the old man gratefully said. Follow me. Qingshu didn't say much and stood up to lead the way. This Taoist temple is not very large, it was left by the developer of the scenic area who built half of it back then. There is only a relatively wide main house of the temple, next to which is a small wooden and stone house. After entering the wooden fence, in the center is an altar dedicated to the Three Qing statues and ordinary objects such as incense buns. On the left is a room for entertaining guests, with a table and tea set. On the right is a place where Taoist monks usually sit. The simple houses behind the main house, which were later built, were the places for daily living. Passing through the cobblestone path in the yard, the three of them arrived at the door of the small house. Qingshu knocked on the door and pushed it in. This is a very rudimentary cottage, with an old wooden bed from the countryside, a run-down wooden desk, and 3 old bookshelves filled with books, that's all. But a young man wearing a white hoodie was wearing VR glasses in the center of the room, waving his arms void symbol. The 2 elderly people looked at each other. Ziche, there's a guest coming. Qingshu gently tapped his head. Gu Ziche took off his glasses and smiled awkwardly. I was too engrossed in playing and didn't notice. The young man in front of him had long black hair, tied up in a bun at the back of his head, slightly tilted by the VR straps. His eyebrows and eyes curved, with a smile on them. His appearance was not outstanding, at least not eye-catching at first glance in the crowd. However, his facial features were fair and his smile was gentle, making him feel close, like the warm winter sun shining on the snow in the south. He was wearing a cheap white hoodie and khaki pants, looking ordinary. If placed outside the Taoist temple, one would probably only receive a quite gentle young man evaluation. Gu Xiaoyu, are you? Give it a try with the latest technology. Gu Ziche still smiled, it's quite fun. The 2 elders didn't continue to say anything. In modern society, most Taoists are walking in the world and playing games is also normal. Master Qingshu spoke up and said, Ziche, the 2 seniors have something to tell you. After listening, you can make your own decision. The old man nodded gratefully to Qingshu and quickly repeated his previous words to Gu Ziche. After listening, Gu Ziche's lips showed a strange smile and he said, can this also be my turn? In the past 2 years, there have been frequent natural disasters at the foot of the mountain. He naturally knows that many birds have died on the mountain, and several springs have been cut off. Recently, a hurricane swept away 2 thatched cottages, and even in the news, it can be heard that the Earth's orbit has changed. I just never thought that such a catastrophe would be entrusted to me. Gu Ziche looked at the 2 elderly people in front of him. They lowered their heads, with deep wrinkles on their faces, and their clothes hanging loosely on their thin bodies, appearing both respectful and hesitant. If only I can, then whether I agree or not is actually secondary. Gu Ziche sighed inwardly. As long as this news is released, countless people will criticize me for not going to save them. Now, these 2 Taoist priests are just trying to save themselves and their masters. If I don't follow the steps, I don't know for sure. But from the bottom of his heart, Gu Ziche did not refuse such a proposal. Rather than fading away after 80 years of cultivation in the mountains, why not go and see it in 50-100 years? Gu Xiaoyu carries the blessings of a sage and is born extraordinary. If there is one person who can save the common people, it must be. You don't need to wear a high hat on me, Gu Ziche interrupted. I'm not the saint you're talking about, but I'm also a normal person. If only I can do it, I will definitely do it. Such a decisive answer stunned everyone present, and the 2 elders didn't even know what to say. The danger and success rate of Taoism have been discussed, and they thought the young man in front of them would hesitate for a moment, even proposing some conditions based on it, but ended up agreeing directly. Gu Ziche calmly said, for the world, it is possible to sacrifice one person to save the world. For me, it is also possible to sacrifice myself to save the world. Even if I am greedy for life and afraid of death and dare not respond, there will naturally be thousands of people pointing out and agreeing on my behalf. Since that's the case, why bother with those hesitating and indecisive processes in the middle? Gu Daoyu's quick thinking is admirable. The old man respectfully arched his hand and called him Daoyu, showing respect to the victims. Ziche. Qingshu Daochang frowned and looked at him, if you don't want to, it's impossible for someone to force you. The green robe swayed with the wind, and the 2 old men dared not speak a word. I know my master protects me, Gu Ziche said with a bright smile. But since you said 6 years ago that I have great fortune and forced me to become a monk, I know there must be something big waiting for me. How did that say? With extraordinary people born, there will naturally be extraordinary ways of life. And don't you think it's so handsome? It's like the plot in a storybook. Gu Ziche smiled and snatched the dust from his master's hand, waved it casually, and placed it on his shoulder. My disciple is unfilial, here we go to save the people. 40 days later, Zhongnan Mountain. Hundreds of elderly people with white beards and more of their own disciples stood on half of the main peak platform. The original practice was to set the location at Longhu Mountain, but most Taoists were not interested in the current family lineage of Longhu Mountain. Therefore, with the advice of many reclusive elders, they decided to set it at Zhongnan Mountain, and even built a temporary gossip tower on the main peak. Gu Ziche was dressed in a white Taoist robe today, with a sandalwood hairpin inserted into his bun. He was simple and elegant, with wide sleeves and a gentle breeze, hunting in the strong wind on the mountaintop. He was still carrying a bag with food and water inside, as well as some, maybe useful, charms. Taoist Qingshu glanced at his beloved disciple and finally let out a long sigh. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all ready. An old man arched his hand to the people beside the high platform. Gu Ziche's face remained expressionless as he slowly walked up to the center of the high platform. He silently recited the scriptures, trying to soothe the surging emotions. Often able to satisfy one's desires and calm one's heart, purify one's heart and clear one's mind, naturally the 6 desires do not arise, and the 3 poisons are eliminated. I'm afraid, of course I'm afraid, but that doesn't work. There was an old man walking in each of the 8 directions of the high platform, and apart from Qingshu Daochang and the contemporary heavenly master, Gu Ziche didn't know anyone. Probably a senior who has been in seclusion for a long time, he thought to himself silently. He even saw an old man with wrinkles stacked on his bones, so old that he couldn't see clearly. With the help of several elderly people, he slowly walked up the high platform, not knowing how old he was. Many young disciples who came to observe the ceremony looked up at Gu Ziche on the high platform with different expressions. Many of them had fantasized about such a scene, standing on a high platform at the top of a mountain, in the center of public attention. But they also know that those who are now above are not heroes or idols, but sacrificial beings. Cutting off 5,000 years of blessings, traversing the future, without knowing the date of return, the path of return, the success or failure, and the end. We can start now, said the contemporary celestial master calmly. The other 7 also nodded. He turned his head and said seriously to Gu Ziche, Gu Xiaoyu, let me repeat it again. If this method goes smoothly, you will go to this place 5,000 years later, but you will also lose 5,000 years of blessings. Your task is to find the cause of the catastrophe and prevent the destruction of the world. If humanity exists in the future, the level of technology will also be beyond our current understanding, so there is nothing to remind you of. I can only wish you a smooth trip. In the end, he sighed and said, our elders have been idle for many years, unable to save a penny from the world. We can only rely on the younger generation alone, feeling extremely ashamed. Gu Xiaoyu is here, and a few of us will record you as a Taoist. We will invite everyone to share the same path day and night, pray for blessings, or help us a little. Or we cannot make a profit, but our manpower is poor, and we can maintain our abilities to this end. Master Tian doesn't need to be like this. Gu Ziche arched his hand, his fingertips still trembling with nervousness, but his smile remained free and unrestrained. Water is good for benefiting all things without fighting, and it is in the evil of others. Therefore, it is almost like the Tao. Young people go to evil places without fear, and benefit the world without fighting. Please forgive me for my recklessness, and observe the children. Let's go and become the Tao. The heavenly master naturally understood that Gu Ziche was broadening their hearts and encouraging himself. He let out a sigh of freedom in his heart, without further ado, and informed the seniors to take action. 8 dim jade stones were taken out by him from a small golden silk bag and placed in 8 different directions. Is this the legendary spirit stone? Gu Ziche's heart lit up with a flash of spiritual light, but it was no longer convenient to ask further questions. In the end, the heavenly master sat back in his original position, and the 8 seniors pinched the spell together. It is said that one can view all hearts with one mind, all bodies with one body, all things with one thing, and all worlds with one life. It is said that one can use their heart to represent the will of heaven, their mouth to represent the words of heaven, their hands to represent the achievements of heaven, and their body to represent the affairs of heaven. It is said that one can perceive the heavens and the times above, understand the geography below, understand the material situation in the middle, and communicate with people. It is said that he can use Miluan Tian Di, enter and exit the realm of nature, advance and retreat from ancient and modern times, and portray both inner and outer characters. The sage is coming, please tell heaven and earth. Blessing all sentient beings, never forget the longevity exam. A thought from ancient and modern times has been like 1,000 years. On that day, countless people saw the golden floating light surging up from the summit of Mount Zhongnan, like a ray of light. Gu Ziche looked at the golden sage statue standing behind him, and suddenly remembered Zhuangzi's sentence in his mind, a sage never dies, and there are more thieves. As long as the world still looks forward to saints, there will definitely be thieves who deceive the world and steal fame by borrowing the words of saints. So, I can be considered a thief. I am not a saint, but I borrow the name of a saint to ask heaven and earth to open up the Dharma, enter and exit nature, advance and retreat from ancient and modern times. It's really interesting. And by borrowing the blessings of 5,000 years, I have stolen all the people born for a lifetime. Chapter 2. Prisoners and Gas Refining. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Gu Ziche did not feel any discomfort. He gradually floated in the light, the external flow changing, and indescribable colors constantly flowing. It was something beyond human senses, difficult to describe, only to comprehend. What will the earth be like in 5,000 years? Gu Ziche pondered to himself, whether technology has reached its peak or humanity has already become extinct. The blessings surrounded him like substance, carrying the sound of people praying for blessings, but they continued to weaken, which was the cost of crossing time. As time passed, the vast blessings were also cut off layer by layer. Until the light gradually faded, Gu Ziche could vaguely see the scenery outside. Let me see. This. Gu Ziche, who was originally planning to appreciate the scenery of Mount Zhongnan 5,000 years later, was completely stunned. Because outside is a dark sea of stars. In the distance, a star is burning brightly. Damn it. Gu Ziche had no idea how he appeared in the universe, but the only thing he could be certain of was that he didn't have a few minutes to live. Without a spacesuit, humans can survive in outer space for less than 30 seconds, and extreme temperatures, pressure differences, and radiation can quickly take their lives. In fact, there is already a problem with the Taoist priests positioning this place 5,000 years later, because the universe is expanding, but the position they are positioning remains unchanged under the strange mixture of science and metaphysics. In short, Gu Ziche is currently far and far from Earth. In his sight, time passed rapidly, and the stars in the sky were moving away from him in a redshift. As the last blessing disappeared, he lost all protection, and the temperature of nearly 200 degrees below zero immediately made him lose consciousness. The last thought that lingers in my mind is to die before I succeed. Not far away, a small spacecraft is quietly moored with all its stealth devices activated. Not long ago, they observed strange temporal and spatial fluctuations and secretly rushed over, only to see a flash of light, and a young man in a white robe appeared directly in space. Ah! How could it be a person? A wild female voice sounded in the cockpit. His life response is rapidly declining. He's dying. Let's save it first and see the situation. Is he wearing a Taoist robe? Is he a person from the 7 heavens? Maybe so, but how could a person be teleported into space? It seems like they haven't had any cultivation yet. Anyway, let's save it first. Maybe we can extort a sum of money, and we won't have to scavenge this year. Autonomous ships have been dispatched and are currently conducting rescue operations. Warning. We are about to lose our vital response and require immediate medical assistance. Damn it, there's no professional medical cabin on board. Try using Tianyuan Holy Dew. Hey. Do you know how expensive that is? So why not save it? Forget it. Save him. It's better if he's worth a drop of holy dew from me. Not long after, Ziche slowly woke up, and what caught his eye was the iron-gray ceiling. I'm not dead. I don't seem to be feeling any discomfort, he murmured, trying to sit up on the bed, but suddenly realized that his hands couldn't move and his feet didn't listen. He looked at his hands and feet in a panic. Fortunately, they were all there, but he couldn't control them. It's like the brain's commands cannot reach the nerves of the limbs. Ziche looked around. It looked like a small room, with iron-gray metal forming the basic structure of the room, without any seams, seamlessly integrated. Next to it was a black workbench and a shelf, but it was empty, as if all the furnishings had been moved away. And he was lying on an iron bed, with nothing but an iron plate, a bit of a person. Did someone save you? Look at the furnishings inside the house. Even if it's not a human, it's a creature with a similar body shape to humans. Ziche quickly analyzed, based on the layout of the house, it shouldn't be a dedicated prison cell, but a regular room renovation. However, we can't rule out special circumstances where cultural habits are different from humans. But soon he didn't need to analyze anymore, as there were a few urgent prompts. The door was opened. A few humans dressed in strange clothes walked in outside the door, 2 men and 1 woman, with colorful hair and neon-like electronic flashes. The clothes were tight, short-sleeved shorts that were easy to move, but the collar was made into a traditional cross-necked right lapel, and there were leather pockets of various sizes hanging on the waist and back. It was unclear what was inside. There is a man holding a large cigar in his mouth, but it has not been lit. He is carrying a small gun with a strong sense of technology around his waist and has a strong physique. The other man has a normal figure, with a blue long sword pinned around his waist. The woman has a pair of brown cat ears, but her face is very fierce, with several scars crisscrossing, revealing a murderous aura. It's human. Ziche felt a little relieved, at least not being thrown into the hands of aliens. He woke up. Can you take him over? The man said, casually wiping it, and a strange light flashed through. Ziche found that his legs could move now. But what this man said was somewhat incomprehensible to him, like Chinese but not quite right. You have lifted the ban, what if he escapes? The woman's gaze turned to Ziche. The man pulled Ziche over and pressed his shoulder, saying, what are you afraid of? He's not even a cultivator. We've also taken that pack of talismans. Okay, then take him to see Sister Yi. The woman shrugged and said she had no objections. Ziche listened attentively to their conversation and roughly understood a part of it. It's normal for Chinese to have changed in 5,000 years. Fortunately, I can understand it, he thought happily, but then aroused strong curiosity. What has become of humanity in these 5,000 years? Where has civilization developed to? But now he is still a prisoner, so he can only restrain his curiosity and carefully observe the surroundings. Still unable to control his hands, the man pressed him step by step and walked out of the room. Through the iron-gray passage, he arrived at a door emitting a faint blue light. That door appeared to be made of jade. A complete piece of white jade was cut into a gate that was over 2 meters high and 1 meter wide, with incomprehensible patterns carved on it, shimmering with blue light, emitting a comfortable atmosphere for Ziche. The moment he pushed the door open, his eyes instantly changed. All the barriers around him have disappeared, and he is in the universe. In the distance is a blue A-type star, with a shimmering sea of stars above and below. But he still stood on the ground, and so did the 3 people following behind him. There are several seats and a control console in front, which seems to be a place like the driver's cab. After a short period of shock, Ziche regained his senses and began to think about the structure here. I don't know if it's true full transparency or screen projection. I guess it's screen projection. This should be the cockpit of the spacecraft, and this kind of cockpit can observe the surroundings without blind spots. It's not wrong. Don't look around, kneel down. The sturdy man behind him kicked him, and Ziche only heard a click sound. His thigh bone actually cracked open, and he fell to the empty floor. The excruciating pain struck, and he gritted his teeth and persevered, with a cold sweat oozing from his forehead and a low moan of, The pain she had never experienced swept through her lower body, and Ziche kept silently reciting the Qing Jing Jing in her heart to maintain her inner calmness. Fierce tiger, don't be so violent. A female voice came in, he's just an ordinary person. Ziche looked up and saw a young woman with cat ears walking over. He raised her hand and released a little green light. In the blink of an eye, his fracture was repaired. She was wearing the same tight short-sleeved shorts, and her exposed lower abdomen was covered in terrifying huge scars, with the largest one spreading all the way to her left collarbone, as if she had been sliced in half by someone before. She grabbed Ziche by the neck and picked him up, throwing him onto the nearby seat. All right, let's get to the point. Introduce yourself, she said with a dangerous smile. Ziche pondered for a moment, then suddenly showed a painful expression. He hugged his head tightly and it took him a long time to recover. Before the people around him could get impatient, he said, My name is Ziche. As the words fell, several people looked at each other. Hey, do any of you understand what he said? The man speaking was the swordsman. I seem to understand, but I also feel a bit confused, said the strong man. Don't make any noise, said the woman who was referred to as Ziche by her subordinates. This is the elegant language used by the 7 great ancestors. I can understand it a bit. After speaking, she continued to signal Ziche, continuing, which family are you from and why did you suddenly run into the universe? Ziche continued to show a painful expression on his face. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I seem to have suddenly gone into space. And then my whole body is boiling, burning. And then I can't remember anything. I suggest you don't pretend to have amnesia. Ziche's eyes gradually sharpened. This is not a so-called civilized region. In order to save you, I lost a drop of Tianyuan holy dew. If you are not worth this money, we will tear you apart. Your spiritual roots will be sold to Xuanwu education, your brain will be sold to Lingbao Tianzong, your blood will be sold to Blood Immortal Sword Sect, and your bones and meat will be sold to Dragon Yin Sword Sect. But, I really don't remember. Ziche showed a frightened look appropriately, but he didn't know a bit like him, after all, he had never received similar training before. Ziche, go ahead and search for your soul, said the cat-eared woman irritably. Indeed, why bother so much, the strong man agreed. Sister Yi scolded impatiently, what's so urgent? I'm not even in a hurry. Are you in a hurry now? I'm also using my Tianyuan holy dew. This guy must be from the 7th class, and he'll speak incomprehensible refined language and wear a pure plant-woven Taoist robe. If any of his masters or parents impose restrictions on him, we'll all be finished. The other few reluctantly dared not speak. Yi looked at Ziche with some anger and said, Damn. I knew I shouldn't have saved you. Hey, idiot, do you remember what your parents were called and where did you practice? Ziche held his head and thought for a while before whispering back, it seems like he's in Dongxiao Palace. I can't find the Dongxiao Palace you mentioned. Ziche's eyes lit up with data. Ziche showed a bewildered expression. Yi fell into a brief silence helplessly. Our spaceship has 2 more days to arrive at port. You hold your useless head and think carefully. If there is no useful information, you are ready to be dismantled and sold. After finishing speaking, she waved her hand and instructed a few people to send him back. Lock the door, there's no need to impose any restrictions. Duoer, you're responsible for giving him 3 meals a day. You can meet his reasonable demands, that's it. The cat-eared woman named Duoer was obviously not very happy, but she dared not refute Yi Jie's order. She kicked Gu Ziche with hatred and carried him back to the room. After they left, the swordsman asked, Sister Yi, what do you plan to do? Are you really going to dismantle and sell him? This guy doesn't even have any cultivation, even if he's dismantled, no one will take him in. At most, he'll be sent to the slaughterhouse to sell at meat prices, but I still feel sorry for the energy money he spent on a trip. She sighed, I just saw it. He really doesn't have any cultivation at all. It's impossible for a normal person to be in their 20s and not have had any experience with cultivation. Besides, he's probably expelled from the 7th level because he made a mistake and was stripped of his cultivation. He was thrown into the universe to live and die on his own. This kind of person is really difficult to handle, I guess I'll lose money. Gu Ziche was kicked into the room by Duoer and then heard a loud door closing sound. The surroundings immediately fell into silence. Gu Ziche paused for a few seconds, then moved his body back to the bed and let out a long sigh, calming his tense emotions. From the conversation just now, there are still many things that can be analyzed. What is the Blood Immortal Sword Sect, the Lingbao Heavenly Sect, and this strange spaceship? He touched the wall made of unknown metal and said, did Earth create cultivation and successfully combine it with technology? The healing ability exhibited by Sister Yi, as well as the abnormal brute force of the ferocious tiger, should all belong to cultivators. If it had been before, he would have scoffed at the so-called cultivation of immortals. Even though he was originally a monk, he completely did not agree with the so-called cultivation of immortality. For him, cultivation means the pursuit of the soul, not something strange and chaotic. But before leaving, the huge gossip and things resembling spirit stones on the summit of Mount Zhongnan, as well as the soaring light and 5,000 years of travel, made it impossible for him to say such words as, cultivating immortality is impossible. That is to say, there have been immortals on Earth since ancient times, and someday in the future, all of this will come to an end, Gu Ziche speculated to himself. I don't know if what Sister Yi said is true, but no matter what, I need to have at least some ability to protect myself. He murmured to himself, anyway, I've been idle these past few days. Should I give it a try? What if in this era, one can cultivate immortality? Where to start first? Unfortunately, I didn't finish reading all the books in my master's collection when I left, as there seemed to be many methods for refining qi. Gu Ziche felt a bit regretful, as he had always been uninterested in the cultivation method that ancient people had imagined. He usually prioritized reading books on philosophy. Fortunately, I have at least read Daozang. Choose one and give it a try. He crossed his knees and closed his eyes, entering meditation as memories of the past gradually surfaced, Ming dynasties, Daozang, cave Xuanbu, various techniques, compilation of life-taking. Qi regulating chapter. Breathing and refining qi method, using the nose to absorb qi, using the mouth to exhale qi, and slightly inducing it is called long breath. There are 1 ways to absorb qi, and 6 ways to exhale qi. There is 1 way to absorb qi, which is called inhalation. There are 6 ways to exhale qi, which are called blowing, exhaling, healing, hihi, deficiency, and swallowing. In theory, this gas refining method requires early morning digestion or the use of supplies such as lichuan. However, due to limited conditions, Gu Ziche can only perform the internal gas regulation method. Wei Qi, 49, 360 breaths, stiff outside, grip firmly, first reconcile, hold saliva in your mouth and do not swallow, spread and rotate the 9 breaths, causing the feet to move 5 inches apart, and when slightly returning qi, your body is like Wei Yi, and your bones and joints are all loosened. Su, 90 breath stop, and when you cannot open a finger, you cannot open it. Gu Ziche was just about to take a 360 breath of Xiao Zhou Tian, but on his first breath, he clearly felt a clear and bright strange airflow, which entered his body along the nasal breath, ran along the meridians, and gradually exhaled in 6 times. He clearly felt much more comfortable in his body. Is this spiritual energy? Is it really useful? He opened his eyes in surprise. He also tried similar breathing and breathing techniques when he was on Earth, but they were just health-preserving methods. Without breathing for 10 years, there was no apparent effect. However, now, he only feels the presence of spiritual energy with a single breath. In order to verify again, reading www.yuyukeangshu.net, Gu Ziche continued to meditate. This time, he ran for 360 days and spent more than an hour. Accompanied by a long breath, Gu Ziche opened his eyes. In an instant, he only felt his eyes bright and his body light. Raise your hand, and the slightly overflowing spiritual energy will blow your sleeve in the wind. Refining gas. Very useful, but I don't know if this method is rare in this era. Can it be used to exchange for one's own life? Gu Ziche pondered. Let's hand it over. Even if it's useless, give them some hope. At least don't kill me in 2 days. Gu Ziche decided, this kind of ordinary person's qi refining method is not very important. Thinking of this, he remembered a large number of spells in his mind, thinking that these things could all be realized, and couldn't help but get excited. At the beginning, when Gu Zu arrived, his life was in danger in the void. He was saved by someone who had been stolen, and his femur was struck, causing him to act ominously. He said, "Now I have left you for his own benefit, and I will show the beginning and end of the longitude and latitude, in order to survive." Gu Zuxi's compilation of life-taking records soothes his killing heart. The ancient said, a wise person is not happy with changes without careful consideration, a debater is not happy with a preface without discussion, a censor is not happy with things without provocation. They are all confined to things. As the saying goes, cultivators are not happy with the principle of using divine power, and are also confined to objects. Gu Zu abandoned his martial arts as if he were looking at nothing, indicating that his benevolent spirit is not trapped between one thing and another. A man of Yunshan, with simple hair and a comb, cooks with a few meters. How can a man of theft be enough to save the world? For the next 5,000 years, it is recommended to prioritize Gu Zu's virtue in saving the world. Annotations on the Life of Qingxian Daozu, Volume 1, Records of All Disciples. Chapter 3. Engagement. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yi Jia naturally kept monitoring the room and saw Gu Ziche sitting cross-legged. An hour later, she entered the first level of qi refining and raised her eyebrows. Just as she was about to say something, she saw Gu Ziche knocking on the door and calling out for someone, and handed over the qi refining method that he had just remembered. Of course, because the people who learned about this ship couldn't understand classical Chinese, Gu Ziche translated it into vernacular Chinese. Fortunately, the changes in writing were not significant, and people were still writing simplified characters, which is similar to the fact that although each province has its own dialect, the character forms are still very different. Sister Yi pondered over what was in her hand, wanting to scratch her head. I've never heard of it. I've never heard of it. This kind of qi refining. I can't understand it at all. Gu Ziche looked at her with some confusion. Considering Gu Ziche's amnesia and good cooperation attitude, Sister Yi patiently told him something. I don't doubt the authenticity of what you wrote, after all, you just used it yourself, but this way of refining qi is completely different from the current method of refining qi. How does the mainstream refine gas? Gu Ziche asked. Most babies are sent to the training room of the Xuanmu education, to cultivate their innate qi. Generally speaking, babies from wealthy families will be promoted to the qi refining layer, in the training room at the first month of life, and can build a foundation at the age of 1. At this point, Yi sighed, poor people like us who don't have the money to buy the Xuanmo education package will start using the qi refining method for cultivation after literacy. However, they usually borrow a spirit gathering array and feel the infiltration of spiritual energy into the body inside. Depending on their personal talents, staying for a few days to more than 10 years can promote them to the qi refining period. The usual way of refining qi is to tell you what posture is necessary to fully experience the infiltration of heaven and earth's spiritual energy, but this kind of breathing is simply unheard of. Yi Jie showed a headache expression. Maybe it's something from your 7 major internal components, but it's not easy to set a price. Forget it, you're doing well, keep working hard, and get something good to sell for me. Yi Jie seems to be in a good mood. She had already planned to completely lose money, but now she has at least a qi refining method that cannot figure out the price. In any case, she won't lose money. Gu Ziche didn't say much and continued to be escorted and thrown back into the room, but this time, the force of being thrown was a bit less. Rubbing his sore thighs, Gu Ziche sat cross-legged on the bed again. The refining of qi in this era was completely unexpected to him, and he even completely abandoned breathing. It is difficult for Gu Ziche to say whether technological progress has eliminated this set of things, and he does not plan to evaluate it for the time being. But that kind of, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth directly infiltrates his body, gives him a feeling of being a tycoon. You should know that on Earth 5,000 years ago, there was no trace of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. For decades, it wasn't until my white hair turned gray that I could be considered successful in my work, equivalent to a trace of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. As time passed, Gu Ziche could clearly feel that the qi sensation in the dantian was becoming stronger and stronger. He didn't know what the so-called refining qi layer by layer in this era was. He could only feel that the spiritual energy that could be controlled by him was increasing every time he exhaled. He reviewed all the spells he still remembered, but dared not practice them here. He could guarantee that there must be someone on board monitoring him. These days are a bit difficult. Gu Ziche sighed inwardly, but no matter what, at least my life is still alive, and cultivating immortality has been proven feasible. Let's first try to survive in this starry sea, at least have some foothold, and then try to collect intelligence about the catastrophe. He may not make preconceived assumptions about the cause of the catastrophe, but in short, the stronger the power, the greater the influence, which will definitely be helpful to his goals. After temporarily sorting out his thoughts, Gu Ziche began to practice again. In the spaceship, I don't know the time, but during Gu Ziche's 18th Great Show, which is the 360 times of breathing, he fell heavily to the ground, and the entire spaceship shook violently. What's going on? Gu Ziche looked to the side, and there seemed to be a control screen on one side of the room. He casually swiped twice, and a wall suddenly became transparent, directly revealing the scene outside. He leaned against the porthole, and under the flickering space curtain, several blue spaceships gradually approached, intercepting torpedoes at high speed and rushing towards the spaceship with the flames of the thrusters. At this point, the cab. Let's all cheer up. We're going to do something big. Yi shouted loudly, holding her cigar. There's no need to smoke this thing. As long as they want something like a hobby, they can immediately get an auxiliary machine to give them a shot. However, many people on the ship are still clinging to these retro things, possibly because they look more like pirates, which is a self-psychological suggestion. As if in a starry cockpit, Yi Jie sat in place, wearing a strange helmet. Her divine consciousness continued to diverge, until it filled the universe with a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers, capturing all the movements within the range in detail. Not far away, a small black ship that was gradually disintegrating was constantly throwing wreckage and parts around. It was a smuggling ship, but unfortunately, it had already been destroyed by maritime police. I don't know if it's luck or misfortune. The swordsman muttered, it wouldn't have been discovered by the Coast Guard. They could have safely returned to the port, but on the way, they collided with this disorderly smuggling ship, and as a result, they were also discovered. Don't complain, this kind of small boat will be pursued by the Coast Guard formation. It must have brought something amazing. Yi licked the corner of her mouth, maybe we'll make a big profit. This iron-gray pirate spacecraft projected a gravitational wave and captured a black box among the wreckage, slowly taking it in. I caught it. Cover for me. Door shouted loudly. Accompanied by a warning sound, one side of the spaceship's cabin door opened, and the swordsman jumped out straight. I saw his fluorescent blue ancient sword unsheathed, then continuously rotating around his body, transforming into an invisible barrier. The void flickered like a blue lightning, rushing towards the black box. Fingers connected, and a large number of sword shots flew, directly intercepting and exploding all incoming torpedoes. Perhaps it was discovered that this missile weapon was not effective on this spacecraft, and 10 blue Coast Guard small spacecraft began to change shape. In the light of the blue and white light, the original torpedo launch port was folded back into the cabin, replaced by a small caliber gun turret similar to emitting lasers. The patterns on the spaceship's body lit up one by one, and a large amount of blue-purple light condensed at the muzzle. This light effect and prestige seemed to indicate that the attack just now was just an ordinary probe. AI. Self-maneuver and dodge, confirm incoming weapons. Regular artillery, modified version of the small carrier directly under the Tianchideo Coast Guard frigate. Yi quickly arranged targets for the AI. This old-fashioned AI cannot even automatically determine enemy weapons, and can only manually input commands. Confirmed. Light speed energy weapon, fully armored structure penetrating, performing space folding for this ship, shield output reaching maximum, performing random maneuver evasion. Suddenly, the entire spacecraft shrank by a full half, which was the result of folding some of the compartments, while the originally invisible dark blue shield gradually became shiny. At the next moment, more than 40 blue-purple lightning beams crossed the universe at the speed of light. No spaceship could perform maneuvering evasion at this speed of attack, either resisting hard or randomly dodging to see if they could dodge a few rounds. They had good luck this time, only 3 shots hit the shield, splattering a large number of broken ripples on it. Damn it, this thing is a bit fierce, we can't withstand 5 shots at the same time. Yi Jie roared, they are private coast guards. But this also means that the thing they're chasing is very valuable. The first round of shelling ended, and the spacecraft's rear compartment was quickly opened. A large number of strange black balls were thrown out, scattered in the space behind the engine. This is a lightning bead that can intercept attacks like thunder and detonate them in advance, but it has an upper limit on its endurance. As energy attacks, ray-like gamma rays are not affected by these small beads. However, the spacecraft of cultivators are mostly made of high-density materials such as Tianhe Xian Tai and Abyss Ancient Gold, with atomic density approaching a degenerate state and possessing heaven and earth spiritual energy, attributes that do not conform to scientific principles. In addition, the cultivator's strong physique makes gamma rays, which should be the nemesis of life, less effective on them. The deployment of lightning bolts has been completed, but the space in the universe is too large and can only be slightly disturbed. Moreover, the 10 spacecraft behind them have gradually approached, attempting to use medium-range weapons. The sword-wielding man who assisted in capturing was obviously a bit anxious. He took out a yellow paper talisman from his pocket and pasted it on the black box, silently muttering something in the vacuum. He patted the box and it quickly fell into the spacecraft's cargo warehouse under the capture of gravitational waves. Seeing the box being taken away, the Coast Guard spacecraft became anxious and no longer maintained their shelling distance. Instead, they started their engines and approached directly, attempting to intercept with medium and close-range weapons. Yu reading www.yuyukeangshu.net. But the reason why pirate ships are called pirate ships is not because they carry pirates. but because the design and modification of the ships fully conformed to the characteristics of pirates. Instant explosive firepower and extreme escapability. Since the goods have been loaded into the cabin, there is no need to play games with these people. The spaceship directly started its full power engine, and a huge amount of spiritual energy from heaven and earth flooded into the energy warehouse. After Yijie's controller played a few clever short-distance space jumps, the ferry engine was completely ignited, reaching 98% of the speed of sublight. After a few minutes of preparation, it directly jumped into the subspace. The frigate behind cannot be equipped with massive leaps and superluminal interference facilities, nor can it chase the continuous space jumps, sublight sprints, and subspace jumps of the pirate spaceship in a short period of time. Therefore, it reluctantly gave up tracking. The spaceship cheered and celebrated a successful tiger mouth hunt, which was also from the mouth of the private maritime police of the Heavenly Master Dao, one of the 7 great sections. Although it is inevitable to enter the subspace to avoid, Yijie has rich experience in subspace navigation and basically won't get lost. Gu Ziche looked out the window, where there was no longer a sea of stars, but endless white clouds and mist, as if sailing through a sea of clouds. He was not sure what exactly happened. The battle with the pirates actually took place in just a few minutes, and the exchange of attack and defense was mostly done at the speed of light. He only saw torpedoes and a few passing blue-purple lightning rays, and the spaceship entered subspace. I don't know how long it has been, but with the slight vibration of the spacecraft, the scenery outside the porthole has once again turned into space. A blue B-type dwarf star is slowly burning in the dark background, and the spacecraft is gradually entering its Kuiper belt and approaching a black planet. They have arrived at the port. Chapter 4. The Present of the Immortal Cultivation Realm. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As the spaceship slowly landed on the surface of the planet, Gu Ziche saw it better. It was a strange planet without an atmosphere, completely black, and covered in strange things on its crust, mostly metal, with a few parts indistinguishable. Not long after, the door was opened and Duoer came over to carry Gu Ziche down the spaceship, walking along a corridor into a black building. A foul odor immediately occupied his nostrils, and the rusty walls and acid-corroded floors around him all gave him a bad impression. This is a garbage planet, Dora explained 2 sentences with difficulty. There are always some waste that cannot be disposed of or has no value for disposal. People have placed several gravity generators in this galaxy, and then threw all the garbage on it, turning it into a garbage planet. The several galaxies near here are all this kind of planet, which we usually call a landfill. Serious people don't run here, only some self-disciplined spacecraft that litter will come, so pirates like us will settle here. But these garbage are not completely useless, but the cost of recycling is higher than the cost of throwing them away. Anyway, since the space is so large, just throw them away. Therefore, these garbage have some value for small organizations like us, but they need to be screened. Autonomous machinery will be judged by those autonomous spacecraft as unknown machinery not in the system and erased, so manual operation is required. Let the gatekeeper tell you the rest, Dor said calmly. This is already one of the few job positions that require people. You can only leave here when you earn enough money to save you. Gu Ziche was carried through the decaying black gate, and an old man was sitting on a nearby chair sleeping. Wake up, gatekeeper, I've brought you a new person, said Duoer coldly. Hey. Someone's here. The old man lazily stretched out and squinted his eyes as he looked at Gu Ziche. And Gu Ziche was also observing him. The old man's appearance was decent, although he was old, he could tell that he was handsome when he was young. However, for some reason that he was not yet aware of, all the people he had seen so far looked very good, which made Gu Ziche, who was already quite ordinary, even more indifferent to others. Is this doll in his early 20s, with a layer of refined energy? Did he bring him to die? The old man asked listlessly. I won't die so fast. If you take precautions, you can probably live for about a year, said Duor. Okay, it's all up to you, anyway. The old man took Gu Ziche, his thin palm carrying tremendous strength. Wait a moment. Gu Ziche looked at Duor. I want to ask you a question. Duor paused for a moment and said, what's the problem? How far is this from the earth? Gu Ziche asked seriously. This is a question he has carefully considered and decided on. He is not very good at startling others, and can roughly estimate the current level and scope of human influence. And judging from Duor's impatience with himself, he only has one chance at most to ask a question. Duor paused for a moment and instinctively replied, 20,000 light-years. Gu Ziche's heart beat fiercely. Based on his limited astronomical knowledge, the radius of the Milky Way is 100,000 light-years, which means that his current position is at least outside the Milky Way. Since this is a garbage dump, there must be a lot of human activity in the nearby galaxies, and there may even be a large habitable planet. Gu Ziche thought to himself. Since the garbage dump is here, the place where garbage is generated cannot be far away. It is unlikely that humans will have to fly to an extragalactic system to dispose of garbage. This area is likely an industrial or living center. That is to say, humans have established large colonies at least 210,000 light-years away from Earth. Since we have separated from the Milky Way, we must have already activated the technology of superluminal navigation, Gu Ziche sighed. However, this is also normal. Even cultivation has appeared, combined with human technology. It is not a big deal to run out of the Milky Way. The current question is, where have the footsteps of human expansion gone? I wouldn't have colonized the entire universe, would I? After finishing speaking, Duor left without explaining anything more. Instead, the gatekeeper watched Gu Ziche's lewd, hee-hee smile, causing him to shiver. What do you call senior? Gu Ziche asked. The old man chuckled and said, just call me the gatekeeper. But what you said is not easy to understand. You only know elegant language. Did you just learn a common language? It's quite interesting. Gu Ziche remained silent. He has just gradually figured out a way to use common language from the conversations of the spacecraft members. For example, it's like listening to Japanese English, which seems to be understandable but not understandable. This thing seems to be in English, but how can it be like Japanese? Come on, let me take you to collect your equipment. The old man stood up. I hope you don't die too soon. This is not a good place. Gu Ziche followed the gatekeeper step by step, walking among the empty and dark buildings. There is only a small amount of household waste here, the vast majority of which are large and untreatable garbage, such as giant structure wreckage and discarded gold and iron, many of which have strong radiation and corrosion, and even some have not been cleaned up with defense arrays. Coupled with the temperature here, it is over 100 degrees Celsius during the day and close to 200 degrees Celsius at night. Even if you have protective clothing, you can't survive for long. The worst garbage worker in our area is also from the Golden Elixir period. A decade ago, there was a foundation construction period, and he died within a year. His whole body was distorted, and he didn't look like a human or a ghost. The old man gave a sinister and terrifying smile. And your low strength also has another disadvantage. Our food and accommodation here require money, the wear and tear of equipment also require money, the oxygen you breathe also requires money, and you also need to pay for this job. On average, it's about 200 star coins per year. With your strength, it's estimated that not only will you not make money in a year, but you will also owe a lot. You should know that the cultivators of the Golden Elixir period have fought their lives to pick up garbage here, earning over 300 star coins in a year. The muscles on Gu Ziche's face trembled. Oh, by the way, because our job is a bit not very legal, it's normal to be accidentally beaten to death. The old man chuckled. Gu Ziche was too lazy to speak anymore, and he deeply felt the malice of the Interstellar era. Fortunately, it's not easy to have a job these days. Even if you have to pay off your debts for the rest of your life, at least you have food, drink, and shelter. You won't inexplicably die or sell your body to make money, the old man said. It means eating, drinking and living, and then becoming a monster and dying within a year. Gu Ziche roast. The old man looked at him with a gloomy expression and said, if you become the golden elixir period within a year, you can probably live another 5 or 6 years, and then become the primordial infant period within 5 or 6 years. You can live another few decades. If you are lucky enough to become a god in these decades, then congratulations, you can replace me as the gatekeeper, or become a crew member in that pirate group. Is Yuqing period just a senior garbage worker? Is the period of transforming into a garbage dump gatehouse? Gu Ziche didn't know how to evaluate it. In his extremely limited experience in cultivating immortality novels, Yuqing could be called the ancestor, and during the period of transforming into a god, he was a hidden old monster. How could he become a low-level black slave here? What are those standing on the upper level? Immortals. Seeing that the old man in front of him was quite talkative, Gu Ziche decided to take a risk and ask a little more. What about the transformation of the spirit? The old man glanced at him and said, what you look like should be related to the 7 heavens, right? You don't even know that. I have lost my memory. No wonder they threw you here. It turns out it's not easy to kill or let go, the old man chuckled inwardly. But the old man doesn't care about these nonsense either. Look at your youth, let me briefly tell you. Becoming immortal is the standard class boundary, and most of those who have not become immortal are considered lower class. Only when they become immortal can they be considered a normal citizen. Those below Huashen are slaves and beggars, with a rotten life. Selling oneself is not worth much money, and any small battle in the cultivation world would cost trillions of lives. Those in the 3 stages of transforming the mind, refining the void, and Mahayana, are considered normal poor people. Although they may all die, if they are lucky enough to have a job, they will have a small life. The stronger their strength, the better their job will be. For an old man, the lower level of transforming the mind is just managing a garbage dump, and his body is eroded by radiation every day. Originally, the transforming the mind period could last for 2,000 years, but look at me, I'm only 300 years old and I'm about to die. Of course, I'm just saying that people who don't have parents to raise are different from those who have a background in transforming gods like an old man. Once you become a scattered immortal, you can register as a citizen in the cultivation world. You have your own personal terminal, can find a job, go to school, buy things, have insurance, social welfare, and are protected by law. However, in this world, any legal protection is meaningless. If you collide with a noble person, a wandering immortal is just a dog. There's nothing more to say. Slowly crawl in this dog-like world, the stronger your strength, the happier you will live. The old man spat. Young generation, the old man, who lived inexplicably at the age of 300, has figured out one thing. The old man cleared his throat and slowly said in a heavy tone. If a person is strong enough to be able to defeat everyone, then everything is meaningless. Gu Ziche blurted out, if a person's strength is greater than the sum of everyone's strengths, then all rules and constraints are meaningless to him. His desires will devour everything. Is that what he means? The old man glanced at him and said, that's right, you people from noble families like to be cultured, but that sounds much more impressive than the old man's summary. Keep going and live. This is the cultivation world, the old man shook his head and said. Gu Ziche fell into silence and began to ponder what would happen when Xuxian actually appeared. When people were in primitive times, a group of people could easily kill a person with stones. When people were in the era of cold weapons, a group of people holding hay forks could barely kill an armored knight. When people were in the era of hot weapons, a group of people holding kitchen knives might be able to pile up a soldier with a machine gun. When people enter the era of cultivating immortality. If there really is a person who has reached the end of cultivation, if everyone combined cannot defeat him. If that person still has some desire to be human, what will happen then? It is a power and desire that devours everything and expands infinitely. Is this cultivation? Ziche looked up in confusion, looking at the void of the sky. When the individual strength of individuals increases infinitely, they can already anticipate what will happen next. The strong see the weak as ants and consumables, and even do not consider them to be the same species. They use, dominate, and destroy them at will. There will be no moral condemnation, because everyone is like this. There will be no legal constraints, because no one can constrain them. Will they block the path of promotion in order to prevent the weak from gaining the same strength and the possibility of revenge? Obviously. Education monopoly, class solidification, UU reading www.uukangshu.net exterminates genius. Unless that genius is willing to associate with them and become beneficiaries of this class together. Ziche trembled slightly. The old man noticed it and gave a chuckle without saying anything. Let these innocent children from the 7 great ancestors' ivory tower see the cruelty outside. Of course, what he didn't know was that Ziche thought even further, because in this era, all dragon-slaying techniques had already been banned from circulation. Breaking free from the trap of cultivating immortality novels 5,000 years ago, Ziche could easily guess the direction of the development of the cultivation society with a little inspiration from the elderly. No, there's still a loophole in my idea. Ziche suddenly snapped up. The universe is really too big. If humans continue to expand and make the cake bigger, fresh blood will continue to emerge, and a large number of geniuses and lucky people will encounter and rise on the scale of the universe. Class solidification and capital alienation cannot be completed. But is the cultivation world expanding now? This huge question lingered in Ziche's heart for a long time. As for the star of abandoned objects, amidst the decay of his body, there was a nobleman named Hong, who often befriended the deity Guzu. After a leisurely day, he said, in today's world, courage is revered, and immortals ride the clouds, towering above it. He said that one hand can turn the sky, and that one can follow the law when speaking. Guzu said, what is his heart? Ai smiled and said, why do I ask about this matter? Where do you stand? Are you happy? Are you healthy? Can you speak? Guzu said, I am also clear. Annotations on the Life of Qingxian Daozu, Volume 1. Chapter 5. Paid Life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The old man brought Ziche to a warehouse, raised his hand, and several items were taken over. A palm-sized octagonal disc, an arm guard-like device, a long pole, and a cart for pulling goods. This disc is a portable protective suit. When you press it on your chest, it will automatically unfold, providing protection, temperature, and air pressure, but not complete protection. Accidentally being exposed to strong radiation can be fatal. This arm guard is a detector that can help you detect valuable things nearby. However, it's best to remember that valuable things are usually more dangerous because they don't break completely. Long rods can deform and become auxiliary tools such as drills and racks. It's best not to pick things up with your hands. If your protective suit breaks, you can die. A handcart is designed to hold items, and only those in their infancy will receive space rings. The old man gave everything to Ziche and then continued to walk with him. In front of the warehouse is a large hall with a spacious black rust style, like a factory that has been abandoned and emptied. Turning left here is the way out, and there are no restrictions on your working hours. However, if you earn too little every day, you will be directly fired. By firing, I mean throwing you into space. Moving forward is the residential area. I'll take you to record a spiritual verification. This is a converted abandoned factory equipped with a camouflage generator. Autonomous machines outside won't notice it, but getting out is another matter. Although autonomous machines won't attack creatures, detectors may disturb them. So good luck to you. Gu Ziche nodded and followed the old man to the door of a room. Guided by the old man, he released a trace of spiritual energy and placed it into the mechanical device on the door, completing the authentication. Since using this method as a lock, does everyone's spiritual energy differ? Gu Ziche thought to himself. Pushing open the door, the room was pitch black, and with the light of distant stars, one could vaguely see that there were only simple desks, beds, and cabinets inside. This will be your place of residence from now on. There is a simple control screen next to the table where you can turn on the lights, eat, and other things. Self-disciplined machines can do it, and you can add some furniture if you want, but it will cost money. If you owe too much, you will also be fired. Finally, a warm reminder that when picking up garbage, it's not just garbage that poses a danger, but also people. After speaking, the old man walked away unsteadily. If it weren't for knowing that he was a cultivator in the period of transforming into a god, he wouldn't be much different from the gatekeeper. Gu Ziche closed the door and sat on a rusted steel bed, beginning to cross-legged meditate. In the past 2 days, he has received too much information and his mood has fluctuated several times, which is not appropriate. Truly responding to things, truly acquiring nature, always responding to stillness, always being quiet. After silently reciting the Qing Sutra 3 times, his heart completely calmed down. The spiritual platform was empty and clear, as if it had not yet existed, and it was approaching the state of observing one's heart internally, without one's heart. After that, he opened his eyes again and looked around. The room is made of unknown steel, and the beds, tables, and cabinets are all made of this material, which has grown rust and corrosion marks. There is air inside the room, and the air pressure is normal. There is a window next to the table, and outside the window is the black earth, with the faint light of blue stars. Opening the control screen, a faint blue light lit up, displaying his current situation. Owner. Gu Ziche, during the gas refining period, balance 0.500000 service. Air pressure, opened, 50/year, temperature, opened, 50/year, oxygen, turned on, 50/year, food, 0.2 per meal, light, not turned on, 0.001/hour, extra furniture. Ordinary cabinet, 5, regular bed, 9, cotton fabric, 2, Gu Ziche calculated slightly that, while ensuring the air pressure, temperature, and oxygen, he would spend more than 350 star coins a year on 3 meals a day, even if one meal cost 223 yuan a day. However, a cultivator in the Golden Elixir period worked hard to earn more than 300 yuan a year. As for the debt of 5 million, he no longer wants to manage it. Anyway, those people didn't kill him, which means he is still useful for the time being. As long as he saves a little here, he won't be thrown out. This harsh environment may cause pain for others, but Gu Ziche doesn't care. When he was on the mountain, he would eat vegetarian meals 1 to 2 times a day, and during the Chinese New Year, he would eat some cabbage dumplings dipped in vinegar. He usually slept on an old wooden bed and spent his days reading and meditating. There is electricity in the mountains, and occasionally the master comes to bring some electronic products up the mountain for him to play with when he is idle. It's just a matter of trying and giving it a try. People who practice Taoism have no material desires, so if there are, they should be sent. The control screen still shows the time, which is currently 13.20. Gu Ziche doesn't know how this time is calculated, but he doesn't plan to go out for the time being. At least he will practice for a few more days and try to go out when he has some strength behind him. After all, the story of the Foundation period being directly mutated made him a bit nervous. Although he was not afraid of death, he could not die in vain. 5,000 years ago, the life of the entire earth was tied to him, and every step had to be careful and cautious. Sitting cross-legged, he continued to practice Regency compilation record. He still dared not try the powerful Taoist techniques in his memory, fearing that someone would be monitoring him. Accompanied by the breathing of the heavens and earth, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth infiltrated and repaired his body along the meridians, soaking his bones, blood, and soul, clearing and removing impurities, and so on. The spiritual energy here is obviously much less than that on the spaceship. Ziche could vaguely feel that his cultivation speed could not even catch up with 1/3 of that on the spaceship. But due to limited conditions, there is nothing to complain about and we can only rely on time to continue grinding. 3 days later, Ziche slowly woke up, exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and opened his eyes. My state of mind cultivation is still not up to par. The harsh environment here still has an impact on me. After only 72 weeks, I developed a certain level of irritability, which was not what I used to do when I was on the mountain. Ziche was secretly vigilant, as he had recited the Qing Sutra 3 more times before waking up. Opening the control screen, I ordered a portion of food, but it didn't drip for 3 days, which is still a bit uncomfortable for the cultivator during the qi refining period. Just 10 seconds later, the autonomous machine plunged a robotic arm deep into the room and placed a tin can in front of him. Opening the can, there was a dark and unknown object inside, with no odor, making it impossible to guess what it was. After a moment of contemplation, Ziche's fingertips emitted spiritual energy, which turned into a small spiritual wind. He picked up a piece of food and put it in his mouth. Very salty. This was his first reaction. Apart from the salty taste, there is no other taste, no chewiness, just like mud with a lot of salt added. Ziche only realized that there was no water, so he had to spend 0.1 star coins to order another portion of water. The cultivator in the golden elixir period should be able to use spells to condense water, but he did not remember any methods for condensing water, and his strength was insufficient, so he had to spend extra money to purchase it. 5,000 years later, Ziche finally realized the life of spending money on every breath and contract slaves, without knowing whether it was progress or decline. After eating half of it, he put the lid of the can on and set it aside. The food was very precious, and even a meal had to be divided into 2. It's almost time to go pick up the garbage. If I stay any longer, that old man might throw me out. Ziche dared not test the old man's bottom line, took out his equipment, and prepared to go out. From these people, he could guess that the qi refining period should be divided into several layers, but after practicing for a few days, he didn't feel any difference. It was probably that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in his body had been increasing without obvious layering. However, this was not an important thing and was quickly forgotten by Ziche. As long as his strength was improving, it would be good. Place the octagonal disc on your chest, and in an instant, a large plastic-like object bounced out of it, accompanied by the flash of the formation, automating into a black isolation suit that enveloped your entire body. Ziche didn't know how it was made, but he didn't hold his breath inside, and the temperature and pressure were also very suitable. He just felt uncomfortable wearing it, like putting it in a plastic bag, and it was a bit inconvenient for exercise. Putting the protective arm over his left wrist, holding a pole in his right hand, and pulling the car, Ziche slowly walked out of the door. I haven't met anyone, and I haven't seen anyone outside the window in the past 2 days. I don't know how many garbage workers are still here. Ziche thought to himself, but this building is quite large, and it's completely impossible to see how much land it occupies. Maybe someone else left through another door. In previous space movies, leaving a colonial building with a different air pressure required passing through a door that isolated the air pressure. However, this place was obviously different. After walking a distance outside, there was a shimmering barrier, and as long as you passed through the barrier, you would be outside. Ziche walked out cautiously, but just as he was about to leave, he suddenly knelt down on the ground. Gravity is so strong. The blood was rapidly leaving the brain, and the pumping pressure of the heart couldn't keep up with the gravity of the planet. Ziche felt his eyes quickly blur, breathing difficult, and his heart was heavy. He could only try to lie on the ground and read a book to fight against the huge gravity. People have placed several gravitational generators in this galaxy, and then threw all the garbage on it, turning it into a garbage planet. Ziche remembered the sentence that Duor had said. When he was inside the shelter before, he didn't feel it, but now he finally understands one thing. Since gravity is needed to suck up garbage, without interfering with the operation of the galaxy, the greater the gravity, the better. The gravity outside is not something that can be endured during the refining period. Fortunately, he didn't go far. Ziche exerted all his strength to activate the spiritual energy in his body and struggled to climb towards the barrier. With the strengthening of spiritual energy, the heart became more powerful, and he used both hands and feet. After a minute, Ziche finally returned to the inside, sweating profusely and lying on the ground panting. The sudden sensation of dozens of grams of gravity upon leaving can really make people faint and die instantly. If it weren't for his body being strengthened by spiritual energy, it's estimated that just that one moment ago, his blood vessels would be instantly compressed and his brain's blood would flow back. What's wrong with this? Ziche smiled bitterly, it's too outrageous. This is not something that can be done during the qi refining period. Helpless, he could only go to the gatekeeper and ask what to do. The old man was still sleeping and was a bit annoyed when he was awakened by Ziche. Oh my! Why can't I even bear gravity? The refining period is really annoying. Go to the warehouse and get a portable buoyancy generator yourself. Remember, this thing costs money. After thanking him, Ziche quickly left, fearing that the old gatekeeper during this period of transformation might wake up and kill him. The warehouse was very large, and with the metal nameplate, Ziche finally found the portable buoyancy generator, took one, and headed back to the outside world. Chapter 6. First Battle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Landfill star domain, garbage star 19. Ziche struggled to pull the cart on the endless garbage pile, scanning objects underground. The faint blue light of distant stars shone like flickering ghostly flames on his body, like a faint veil of light. Abandoned dim light was reflected on the cold skeleton of the metal giant structure wreckage. Behind him was the boundless universe without atmospheric cover, and the dark sea of stars shimmered with ever-changing light. Together with the small people walking alone, they form a lonely picture. After walking for a long time, the detector lit up with a red dot. Ziche walked over and controlled the pole to turn into a rake, pulling the metal off it. But that thing was very low, and Ziche kept busy, even pulling apart everything with a radius of 20 meters, because they were intricately intertwined like a spider web. He dug and stopped for a whole 4 hours before he succeeded in digging that thing. It was just a small mechanical ball. He doesn't know what it is, but the detector says it has value. Cautiously climbing up the large pit he had dug, Ziche felt hungry again. This physical activity consumed a lot of calories. After digging the pit for 4 hours, although his strengthened body was not exhausted, his stomach had already begun to scream. Looking at a small ball in the car, Ziche fell into silence. Perhaps digging 24 hours a day may not necessarily yield anything. Returning to the shelter, the value detector dealt him another blow, neither light nor heavy. The ball was worth 0.1 star coins, and digging 3 was equivalent to his meal. Returning to the room, Ziche ate the remaining half of the can, drank some water, and then continued to meditate while recovering his strength. He has a premonition that it is absolutely impossible to make money by picking up garbage before he reaches the golden elixir period. His physical strength is too poor, and he cannot break through the valley. He must spend money to buy water and food, dig for a few hours and go hungry. He also has to rent the portable buoyancy generator, which is an additional expense. As for the radiation mentioned by the old man, he has not yet felt it, but it cannot be good luck forever. If it's such a future, do we still need to step into the starry sea? Ziche muttered to himself, then smiled again, blaming himself for causing trouble. This kind of thing is not something he can control. In the following days, Ziche began a regular routine, sleeping for 4 hours a day, meditating for 7 hours, picking up garbage for 12 hours, eating and using the bathroom for 1 hour. To put it bluntly, because he was not of high cultivation and could not automatically expel impurities, he spent 200 stars to buy a restroom, which further worsened his already embarrassing economic situation. Over the course of a week, I lost a whole circle of weight, and even my ribs protruded. On a new day, Ziche finished his meditation and pulled a cart out. There was no more garbage to pick up nearby. He had to walk far every time he went out, but he couldn't bring food because the average temperature outside was minus 150 degrees Celsius. After walking for about 2.5 hours, a faint blue star fell at the end of the steel earth, and the detector finally lit up a red dot. Ziche took a deep breath, and if he couldn't find it again, he would consider returning without success. This time, the item was a bit lower, about 8 meters underground, about 3 floors high. If lucky, it would take 5 or 6 hours to dig, but he was already lucky enough to find valuable items and couldn't expect anything more. Putting down the handcart, the long rod becomes a pry bar, prying open the large metal frame nearby, and then turning into a rake to drag away small objects. 3 hours later, Ziche was completely trapped in a pit, unable to see the outside world. But there was one person like him, wearing protective clothing and obeying the passers-by. Ziche, who could be located under the pit, was completely undetected. During the qi refining period. Can this kind of strength also come to pick up garbage? The person pondered to himself, and his divine sense arrogantly covered him. With just one swift step, he arrived at the top of the pit. Ziche was grabbed by someone's neck and picked up before he could say anything. It's really the qi refining period, can even people like you do this job now? Not bad, it's all mine. He smiled excitedly, gradually increasing his strength, making Ziche's face increasingly red. I can only hope on that. He thought to himself that being discovered and attacked was something he had planned for before. Rengao protects me, Dongxiao protects me, Renhe protects me. Sitting and lying in the Mingtang, hiding in seclusion. Urgent as the 9 heavens' mysterious maiden's law, he silently recited the spell in his heart at an extremely fast pace, and suddenly, he left the person's hand as if he had become ethereal, then quickly moved away with a strange and eerie gait. There is another saying. In the underworld of the underworld, I take on my form, with clouds and mist covering my body, avoiding the sun's essence twice. Urgent as a law. In the next moment, an invisible black mist covered his figure. These are the 6 Ding Retreat Technique Bureau, and Tai Wei Jin Ke Hao Tianshan Er Dun Yin recorded in the Taoist scriptures, all of which are escape and retreat techniques. Ziche knew that he would definitely be attacked and robbed of items in the future, so he had already prepared these 2 techniques. Now that they are being used, they do not disappoint high expectations. But for some reason, the person suddenly turned red in the eyes, seeming insane, and shouted loudly, "Come out! Come out! Come out! Come out! Qi Refining Jr. Hand over the divine power you just used, and I swear to spare you from death." The spiritual power of the golden elixir period made the surrounding steel tremble slightly, with spiritual energy piercing in all directions like substance. Ziche could only retreat and try to withdraw from his attack range. But accidentally, the garbage pile under his feet became unstable, and he fell to the ground. The person showed a cruel smile and said, "I found you." The black spiritual energy transformed into a wolf head shape and rushed towards him, bringing waves of spiritual energy into a strong wind that broke through a path in the steel jungle. Ziche once again dodged by relying on Yubu from the 6 Ding Retreat Technique Bureau, but his retreat technique could cover his body, but not the garbage dump he stepped on. These small footprints were exposed in the divine consciousness of the golden core cultivator. The wolf's head deflected and continued to attack him. Gu Ziche flew back, his lips trembling slightly as he silently recited the mantra. The sky is clear, the earth is peaceful, and the 6 soldiers and 6 armor slay the demons. If anyone dares to disobey my way, Tianping Jinjuan will destroy your form. Urgently summon, the main general kills General Lai Lei, the god of war, General Guan Yu, the deputy general of Yin Lei, General Zhang Fei, the deputy general of Yin Lei, General Huang Zhong, the deputy general of Yin Lei, General Ma Chao, and the deputy general of Yin Lei, General Hu Wei, General Zhao Yun. Go down to the front of the altar to command something. Guan Do Zhong Xiao Wu Lei Ho secret technique. This seemingly strange thunder spell belongs to folk mantras, and the entire process is very cumbersome and requires opening an altar, but short spells are also effective. As soon as the words fell, although there was no atmosphere, thunder echoed everywhere. 6 golden thunderbolts fell and transformed into characters from the 3 kingdoms. 5 of them rushed towards the person, while the remaining, Thunderbolt Zhao Yun, rushed towards the black wolf head, intercepting it. That person was still shocked. Although Gu Ziche was only experiencing spiritual fluctuations during the qi refining period, there was more than one divine power that could use this power. Under the bombardment of 4 thunderbolts, the person was scorched black all over, but still moving. Gu Ziche quickly continued to recite a curse. White energy fills my form in chaos, you steps follow me to ascend to the Yangming. The heavens return to the earth and walk on 7 stars, and the stealthy spirit flies into the 9th age. Evil and rebellion subdue demons, and all disasters do not harm my immortality. I must stay in the Fu Ting for a long time, and spin the Qian to overthrow the Kun ghost and destroy the form. All gods help me slay the demons. Urgent as the imperial decree. A stronger thunderbolt burst out of his palm, causing him to take a few steps back and fall to the ground. The terrifying thunder leapt out at the speed of light and struck the person directly. The physical body of the golden elixir period was directly pierced, and the thunder even spread backwards for tens of thousands of meters, disappearing at an unknown end. After a moment, the unknown golden core cultivator, whose entire head and chest were chopped off, turned into flying ash and was absorbed on the ground by gravity. Gu Ziche sat on the ground, somewhat bewildered. Is that all? Is this the golden elixir? Or is this just the low-level golden elixir period, that's why it's so weak? He walked over, leaving only a pile of charred remains, including a glowing book that seemed unaffected by the thunder. Is there anything else? Gu Ziche bent down and picked it up. It was a secret book with the 3 big characters Wolf Head Wave written on it. I opened it briefly and saw that it was full of colloquial language, such as spiritual energy running from the dantian to the right palm, imagining the roar of a black wolf, lifting the ring finger, and exhaling spiritual energy. Basically, I can learn it by reading it. Gu Ziche simply flipped through it twice and understood. He reached out his right hand, but only spewed out a fist-sized black wolf head, hitting the ground and creating a small pit in the scrap metal there. The power is so weak. Gu Ziche thought to himself, this should be due to his insufficient cultivation and lack of spiritual energy. But why can one unleash such great power with their own Taoist techniques from 5,000 years ago? Gu Ziche immediately raised this question. Is it a problem with the level of divine powers? Gu Ziche thought of this classic setting for cultivating immortals, but felt that it was somewhat incorrect. When I use the Taoist techniques in the Tao Tsang, I hardly consume my own spiritual energy. However, when I use this wolf head wave, almost all of my stored spiritual energy is used. If I guess correctly, this is the biggest difference. If I borrow the external spiritual energy of heaven and earth, then the power of Taoism is no longer unrelated to my cultivation. As long as I can understand and control Taoism, it will borrow force from the outside world to exert itself. If I only use my own spiritual energy, then the power is limited to my own cultivation. There's a big problem here. Gu Ziche immediately realized. Perhaps the strong wanted to weaken the weak, so they were only given this divine power, and all the Taoist techniques that could be borrowed were prohibited from circulation. It is highly possible that Yu can read books at www.yuyukeangshu.net, but currently there is too little information to be completely certain. With a heart full of doubts, Ziche moved the things from the cultivator's car during the golden elixir period and slowly pushed them back. Today's harvest is 2 stars, which is the highest in history, even the total amount of money he earned from picking up garbage for 6 days. Objectively speaking, it is true that killing and looting come quickly, but Ziche did not intend to do so, or rather, did not even think about it. He attacked and killed the enemy just for defense. If that person had a chance to coexist peacefully with him, Ziche wouldn't have done it so thoroughly. Taking off his protective suit, he walked towards the gatekeeper, intending to give him the secret book he had on hand, so as not to owe him too much money and be thrown into space. One day, Zhu worked hard and dug the ground to make a living. When he met someone, it was the golden elixir period. The person said, "If you don't agree with this bad thing, use the body of refining qi to restrain and discard things. How can such a big thing be done by ants? I will teach you to die here." Zhu said, "I have heard that in ordinary ditches, giant fish have no way to return their bodies, and salamanders and squids are used to make them. In the hills where giant beasts walk, there is no way for giant beasts to hide their bodies, and foxes are auspicious. I am to you, small, and even to the baby, small and even small. Now that you kill me, you are using the body of moths and moths to do things like tigers and leopards, using small things to show big things and to take the path of death. Our side is refining qi, and we cannot use less than half a star coin in a day, which will not affect you. If I exist in my body and work together on small things to control the big ones, and you can also control the big ones, you can also control me, use the group to control the big ones, use the strength to control the small ones, wouldn't it be joyful if someone were to do so? They would be gifted with a volume of Wolf Head Wave as a tribute to their ancestors." Star Yuan Za Tan, Anonymous. Chapter 7. Conjectures. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wake up the gatekeeper again. Ziche handed him the secret book and said, "I found it today, let's see if it's useful." The gatekeeper opened his eyes and looked at the secret script with some surprise, then said, "This thing is just ordinary. It's okay for cultivators in the golden elixir's primordial infant stage, but you will definitely explode and die after practicing. Where did you get it from?" Ziche suddenly didn't know what to say because he had practiced and used it, but he didn't feel any discomfort. "Today I saw 2 cultivators fighting outside and both died together. I quietly went over to find something good, and then I found this," he said. The old man took a deep look at Ziche and said, "All right, whatever you say is what you say. Anyway, we're not a good place here. You can deceive and deceive us. This thing is quite valuable. It's worth 100,000 star coins for you. Keep working hard." 100,000. Ziche was somewhat surprised. Is this something he learned in 30 seconds worth 100,000? Well, the secret script is rare, let alone it can be used by this kind of yuaning. In our small place, we may not have a few divine powers during the transformation period. "I calculated a premium for you," said the old man. "By the way, give me this book and I'll make a copy of its contents for you. If you're lucky enough to be promoted to the golden elixir period, you can try practicing it." The old man raised his hand and conjured up a piece of paper out of thin air, then wrote in the air. In just a few seconds, he copied the original content of the book onto the paper and threw it to Ziche. Watching the paper fall, Ziche casually took it back. Suddenly, the old man's eyes lit up and he grabbed Ziche. With that palm, Ziche felt the stars pressing against him, leaving no place to hide. Taking things from the void and removing spiritual energy from the body. Isn't this the ability during the foundation building period? How did you do it? The old man grabbed him in surprise and examined his body. You're also very strange. I didn't notice just now that the fluctuation on your body is clearly a layer of qi refining, but the spiritual energy in your body has already reached the 10th layer of qi refining, and you can still take things from the void. What are you really? Ah. Ziche was not sure what the old man was saying. The spiritual energy can only be used during the foundation building period when it is detached from the body. He was still using this method to eat a few hours ago. After all, he didn't have chopsticks. It's not necessary to use it, it's only during the foundation construction period. The old man was a bit anxious. How did you use it? Controlling the spiritual energy to run out of the body. How else can it be used? No. The old man was a bit short of breath. I know you need to use it this way, but the question is, how did you use it? I just wanted to use it. Did I use it? Two people staring big and small together. The old man was angry and laughed. He put down Ziche and said seriously, during the qi refining period, the spiritual energy enters the body, during the foundation building period, it leaves the body, and during the golden elixir period, the spiritual energy condenses. These are all things that cannot be violated. Unless you have some particularly rebellious mental technique to approach the body, it is impossible to violate the basic rules. But I see that you also have no mental technique, so theoretically, your situation cannot exist. Ziche asked in confusion, why? What and why? During the qi refining period, spiritual energy enters the body, while during the foundation building period, spiritual energy leaves the body. Why? The old man also froze. When you reach your cultivation level, you will automatically become proficient. If you don't reach it, you won't be able to do it. What else can it be? The old man has lived for 300 years and has always been like this. Ziche also fell silent. Why? Two people stared at each other as if they were not on the same channel. The old man waved his hand in frustration and said, forget it, maybe you don't understand either. You go back first and let the old man think carefully. Don't leave the room for the next 2 days. Once I understand, I'll come find you. Okay. Ziche also felt that he needed to think carefully, so he took his leave. Returning to the room, he was still contemplating the previous question. He has always felt that the cultivation of immortals in this world is strange, but it cannot be said where it is strange. This setting sounds very reasonable. During the qi refining period, spiritual energy enters the body, during the foundation building period, spiritual energy leaves the body, and during the golden elixir period, spiritual energy condenses. Similarly, during the Yuanying period, spiritual energy condenses into spiritual consciousness, and so on. These are all things that can only be mastered at a certain level of cultivation. But from the perspective of a Taoist 5,000 years ago, this is very strange. Among all the Taoist treasures, there is no saying about which secret technique can only be mastered by reaching a certain level of power. The 8 seniors who did not have any qi refining skills were able to use the timeless Taoist technique by relying solely on 8 dim and suspected spiritual stones. For now, these are all very powerful Taoist techniques. After all, things like wolf head wave can become divine powers in the golden pill's primordial stage. For Ziche, there is nothing that can only be used during the golden elixir period, but I cannot learn during the qi refining period. After all, there were so many Taoists in the past life, and everyone was an ordinary person. However, the Taoist method of inviting immortals to change heaven and earth through the 5 thunder method cannot be learned. Or rather, the Tao Te Ching written by Laozi, who was revered as the Tai Ching Emperor, is the book of the Tao Te Ching, with supreme supernatural powers. Can ordinary people not read or learn it? There's no such thing. Therefore, he never felt that there was anything he could not learn or achieve. If you want to do it, you have done it, that's all. Why is it that what one can do on their own cannot be done by others, and even the old man says he hasn't seen anyone do it in 300 years? Just believe it. Ziche doesn't think it's that simple. If you just need to believe to be able to do it, then things are also too simple. Just have a paranoid lunatic believe that you can become an immortal and truly become an immortal. There's a big problem here. Ziche thought to himself. He could vaguely guess that there was something very important inside, but the intelligence he received was too limited. So why not start from this perspective? What is the difference between me and other cultivators? Is there anything special about the record of regency that I practiced? Ziche thought of this possibility, and Yu reading www.yuyukeangshu.net worked tirelessly to find the gatekeeper again, and handed him the translated record of regency, in vernacular. I use this method for refining gas, and the problem may lie in it. You can find someone to try it out, Ziche said. Anyway, this secret script has already been given to the pirate group, and giving it to one more person is not a big deal. The old man glanced at Ziche and said, "Okay, I will go find a cultivator during the Qi refining period to try it out. If it really works, the old man will make the decision and ensure that you become a crew member on the ship." After speaking, he pinched a spell and disappeared in place, looking very eager to confirm. Ziche returned to his room and thought to himself, "It seems like there's no need to go out and pick up garbage these past few days. Even if it's not included in the Regency Chronicles, there's still Wolf Head Wave as a foundation. The old man probably won't throw himself out, so it's better to practice directly." Although he successfully killed a cultivator in the Golden Elixir period, the carefree grasp of the gatekeeper left a considerable psychological shadow on Ziche. He was certain that if he couldn't even finish a word in front of the old man, his form and spirit would be destroyed. As the Zhou Tian turned one by one, Ziche's mood calmed down again. The spiritual energy inside the body fluctuates continuously, like breathing in tides, constantly connected to the outside world. Whenever he inhales, infinite spiritual energy flows into his body like a tide, nourishing the meridians. Whenever he exhales, spiritual energy returns to nature, and the spiritual energy in his body declines. Natural fluctuations, quiet fluctuations. Do not take a penny from heaven and earth. At this moment, he vaguely had another conjecture, but it was just a conjecture that needed the old man to rule out another possibility before he could confirm. Chapter 8. Yunshan Galaxy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At this moment, 1,000 light-years away from the landfill where Ziche is located, a large number of spacecraft come and go, forming a prosperous interstellar painting. A massive celestial mountain, almost the same size as a star, forms a binary system with the original star, slowly rotating. The mountain is spindle-shaped and is composed entirely of white rocks. The upper part of the shuttle-shaped structure consists of a city and a mountain peak, with white walls and blue tiles in architectural style, complemented by gold and silver decorations. Although it is elegant and grand, it is shrouded in clouds and mist, seemingly unwilling to let people see the full picture of this architectural complex. In the center of the city, several white rocks stand tall, covering hundreds of thousands of meters, about tens of times the diameter of the Earth. The buildings on the mountain are stacked layer by layer, relying on the central mountain peak, like stars and the moon. The buildings become more luxurious as they climb higher. The amazing divine stones and jade form magnificent pavilions and towers emitting fairy light, shrouded in auspicious clouds and surrounded by white cloud dragons. Xiao, sometimes hiding in the clouds, sometimes looking up and singing softly. At the highest point, there is a 90.9-story palace as warm as white jade, just like the saying, "The White Jade Palace in the Sky," 12 floors and 5 cities, surrounded by the divine palace and fairy mountains, and protected by clouds and dragons, with 9 heavens hanging low. The vast majority of the lower part is made up of white mountains and rocks, with occasional towering peaks and perilous pine trees that add to its elegance. Upon closer inspection, it can be seen that the starry buildings and small residences are hidden within them, embedded in the upside-down peculiar mountains. Facing a cliff on one side and surrounded by a sea of stars on three sides, it is independent and has a lot of fun. The volume of the entire Immortal Mountain is the size of millions of Earths, and it can accommodate billions of cultivators without a doubt. This is the 9th largest commercial hub of the Yunshan galaxy. Vermilion Bird Nebula. Various types of spaceships sail out of the Stargate and then dock on the Fairy Mountain, with various shapes, including traditional metal spaceships, dragon boats and painted boats, mountains, rocks, plants, and trees. In short, they are of strange shapes and diverse designs. All the nearby planets have been transformed into extremely livable human paradise, where strange creatures from various galaxies are released. Tourists can experience the top luxurious travel experience of the Vermilion Bird Nebula, appreciate all the beautiful creatures observed by humans, stay in the top palace, and be accompanied by fairies in and out. A creature resembling a blue whale with a planetary body shape swims freely between galaxies, flashing with the glowing slogan Yunshan Galaxy Commercial Tourism Hub. On the other side, it reads, "Our galaxy has been selected as one of the top 500 livable galaxies in the cultivation realm." This huge creature was just created as a billboard. And on the original star, there were huge white jade rings built around the star slowly orbiting, making people curious whether it was the framework of the legendary Dyson sphere. However, as the white jade ring burst out with colorful solar winds that scattered for millions of kilometers and exploded into scattered light spots, everyone understood its purpose. This terrifying structure surrounding the star was just a huge and never-ending fireworks device. Yes, here we can see the human style that will flourish in cultivation and technological civilization 5,000 years later. And Ziche, who is not a chieftain, was thrown into a garbage dump as soon as he landed. But in other words, people are willing to transform habitable planets for wildlife, but they are unwilling to provide a normal living environment for cultivators below the god level who collect garbage. Thinking about it this way, the subcutaneous layer of this flourishing and luxurious cyber cultivation civilization is actually extremely thought-provoking. On the orbit of the fourth planet in the Yunshan galaxy, a luxurious medium destroyer shimmering with white jade light is steadily passing by the beautiful brown ring of the habitable planet. Inside the spaceship, Ziche was cheering loudly with her crew, each injected with some nerve stimulants, holding a glass of wine to celebrate, while the spaceship pilot was handed over to AI. After all, in a high safety level area like the Yunshan galaxy, there could be no enemy. First of all, let's celebrate. Wishing you a lucky black box. Ziche shouted drunkenly. Oh oh. Everyone raised their glasses in response. Let's celebrate. That. Successfully sold it. Oh, 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 oh. Finally. Let's celebrate. We are completely rich, ha 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 ha. Ziche's crazy laughter echoed throughout the spaceship, and the crew also burst into deafening laughter. They hugged, kissed, danced, rolled, and even engaged in promiscuity, creating a wild scene. In this era, most cultivators do not have the concept of chastity. For cultivators above the primordial stage, their skin bags can be changed at any time. Just buy one and look whatever you want. No one can know if your chastity is still there. Over time, except for some conservative people, everyone no longer cares about this matter. As for the pleasure of intercourse, it has no meaning for the cultivators of this era. They can even stimulate their own brains, secrete special hormones, to obtain the pleasure of intercourse. Most of the time, their intercourse is just to demonstrate a desire for conquest or a special ritual of submission. Of course, there are also pleasures like those on spacecraft that are just for celebration. In the long cultural evolution, this instinctive thing that belongs to animals. Inheriting their own DNA, expanding the genetic reserve of organisms to increase the possibility of adaptive evolution, and thereby increasing the survival probability of biological populations, has become meaningless, even something that only lower life would do. Even if cultivators do it now, it is just a special cultural ritual. Yu reading www.yuyukeangshu.net. Of course, in a situation where reproductive behavior loses its meaning and individual strength is only based on cultivation rather than body size/muscle mass, gender equality is naturally achieved, which can be considered a rare achievement. 50 billion. 50 billion. Yi Jie screamed and rolled on the ground. Inside that box is a new shipborne weapon model from the Celestial Master Dao, which was stolen by an unknown smuggling organization and then taken away by them. It belongs to a highly valuable technological secret. After understanding what was inside, they went directly to the weakest area of the Heavenly Master Dao and secretly planned to sell it in the black market. They happened to encounter the Xuanmu education, which was the most difficult to deal with the Heavenly Master Dao, and paid 50 billion yuan directly. They, who suddenly gained a huge sum of money, directly bought the latest model of spaceship, which was the white jade cast destroyer they were sailing in front of them. If it weren't for the strict review procedures required to buy a larger ship, they would have wished to board a battleship or even a mothership directly. The experience accumulated by pirates over the years made them not let down their guard and cautious all the way. It wasn't until they boarded the ship that they couldn't help but celebrate. As soon as they left the Gowan area, they would immediately enter a state of combat. But what they didn't expect was that their perspective as low-level pirates limited their thinking. They forgot who had set the security level for the major galaxies, and even thought that the high security zone was absolutely safe and natural. They didn't know that the fleets defending the security of the high security zone were only 7 private armies. The so-called security refers to providing limited protection to the weak without infringing on the interests of the 7 major sects, in order to earn reputation. Countless invisible warships silently followed behind this newly manufactured destroyer. Chapter 9. Predication of Immortals. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At the moment when the White Jade battleship jumped out of the Stargate, Duoer, who had proficient navigation experience, realized something was wrong. Sister Yi. There's a problem, she exclaimed nervously. We were supposed to go to the lava domain, but now we're in the Tianjin 17 galaxy. Is there a problem with the positioning AI of Xingmen? Yi asked. Impossible, the Stargate will definitely not have any problems. But before she could finish speaking, the White Jade warship that had just arrived lost control and drifted back, while not far away, a large group of warships showed their figures. A huge dark purple battleship stretches across space, surrounded by hundreds of various warships. Its angular and scarred appearance indicates that it is a cunning ship that has been through the flames of war. The crew fought desperately to regain control, but to no avail. The onboard AI mechanically issued a command error warning sound, manipulating the new ship to fall into the encirclement of the Purple Fleet. Coast Guard. Where's the Coast Guard? This is near the Star Gate. Why haven't they reacted? Yi shouted hysterically. The crew's faces turned pale one by one. They realized a question. Since the positioning of the Stargate cannot be wrong, is there a possibility that the maritime police who controlled the Stargate intentionally brought them here? Damn it! Yi slammed the control panel. The Coast Guard and pirates teamed up. As an experienced pirate, she could recognize at a glance that the dark purple warship in front of her was the main ship of the Afterglow pirate group, the Phantom Knight. This pirate group with battleships was undoubtedly a behemoth to them, a legend in the pirate world, and an unattainable existence. Of course, it is precisely because the other party is a pirate that Yi Jie did not hold the idea of, I will hand over all the money for a life. The matter of saving people's lives will not occur in their industry unless the other party has enough value. But among these people, the only valuable one is the 50 billion targeted by the other party. Switch to manual driving, Fierce Tiger, you go release the interference bomb, Duoer, follow me to open the escape capsule, and everyone else enters the escape boat. Sister Yi quickly arranged. In theory, destroyers do not have remote escape devices, only some egg-shaped escape seats with a little fuel, which can only support low-speed gliding within the local galaxy. However, fortunately, Yi and her team have some feelings for the frigate they once used, so they did not sell it, but instead placed it in the destroyer's escape capsule for emergencies. Half a minute later, the destroyer's turret was opened and handed over to manual operation, releasing a large number of interfering shells, with both radio and visual interference. At the next moment, the entire destroyer exploded with a loud bang. An inconspicuous iron-gray small boat suddenly darted out and swept over the starry sea at lightning speed. The crew looked silently behind them, and the ferocious tiger had already been buried in the explosion. He held the interference gun in his hand until the last moment. But this is the fate of pirates, death is just the most ordinary thing. At this moment, there was a chaos on board the Phantom Knight, and they didn't expect that this small pirate group still had the ability to resist. Even though the ships were controlled by them and there were no escape devices across the galaxy, they exploded and flew out of it an extremely fast frigate. What's even more frustrating is that they didn't activate the superluminal suppressor and transition jammer right next to the Stargate. Because these two things can affect the stability of the Stargate and may even cause it to close, they are absolutely prohibited. In this way, it also gave the other party a perfect chance to escape. A large number of carrier-based aircraft, interceptors, and frigates rushed out of the fleet, chasing the inconspicuous frigate at lightning speed. The ships of the Yue pirates are very advanced, and most of the small interceptors have a speed that exceeds that of the frigate. However, in a situation where both sides have the ability to jump, the pursuit battle is sometimes not just about moving fast. As long as the other party initiates the jump one step in advance, it is almost impossible to intercept without interference. The interceptor's muzzle flickered, firing a large number of miniature space interference shells, attempting to disrupt the spacetime curvature to suppress the frigate's superluminal navigation. However, it was already too late. The ferry engine had warmed up, the second curvature engine had shut down, and the frigate broke through the void and jumped into the subspace. Hundreds of ships looked at each other's faces. As long as you enter the subspace, you can no longer track it. This is an iron law, and subspace is not a normal concept of space. There is no distance, no time, and everything seems to be there, and there seems to be nothing. It is possible that two ships enter the subspace at the same time, but after entering the subspace, they can no longer find each other. It's okay, Captain. We left a tracking beacon on that frigate. As long as they leave the subspace, we can locate them as soon as possible. The technicians shouted, finally suppressing the commotion on the Phantom Knight. The fleet has once again set sail, cruising through the universe, searching for prey that escaped by chance. 3 weeks later, the landfill star field. The gatekeeper suddenly appeared in Gu Zish's room, interrupting his cultivation. Gu Zish's eyes showed a hopeful expression. How is it? The old man's face was very unpleasant, with the words, "Are you playing a prank on me?" He said, an ordinary person has successfully cultivated to the 10th level of Qi refining with this secret script. But still cannot leave their spiritual energy. The good news is that practicing with this secret script is indeed fast, but the bad news is that it has not reached the expected time. Gu Zish's face showed even stronger excitement. The old man's dark face seemed to be covered with question marks. You seem excited about the failure. Gu Ziche nodded and said, I have 2 conjectures, but I can't be sure which one is right, so I need your help to rule out one first. Since it's not a matter of cultivation, it can only be the last one. What is it? The old man quickly asked. It's about cultivating the mind, Gu Ziche said seriously. He handed the stack of paper he had already prepared to the old man, which he had bought for a few weeks with a 1-star coin pen and ink. This old-era item was particularly expensive, but he liked it. The old man looked at it for a while, his brows furrowing tighter and tighter as he said, What is this? Why can't I understand it? Gu Ziche calmly replied, the Tao Te Ching, the Jing Jing Jing, and the Tai Shang Lao Jun Shua Xin Jing are all articles on cultivating the mind. The main idea is to cultivate the mind first, cultivate the purity of the mind, and after the mind and spirit return to nothing, the Tao can naturally be achieved. Can you do what you do by understanding these things? The old man asked with half doubt. Yes, Gu Ziche nodded seriously. Do you have any common mental techniques? If it's convenient, please copy a copy for me and I'll tell you why. Mind cultivation is the fundamental skill of a person who cultivates immortals, and generally reflects the core of this path of cultivation. Gu Ziche wants to learn more about this aspect to confirm his hypothesis. The old man hesitated for a moment, then made a paper and wrote a secret script of over 500 words. He handed it to Gu Ziche and said, "This is part of my mind-transforming technique. It's best if you can persuade me, otherwise." Gu Ziche spent 30 seconds reading these 500 words of vernacular text, and then casually began to activate his spiritual energy according to what was mentioned above, which was very smooth. It only took 20 seconds to complete the operation. Due to incomplete secret scripts, it only took half a week. The old man rushed over like seeing a monster, grabbed his shoulder, and carefully examined his body. "Did you learn it in half a minute?" His voice was a bit dry. It was something he had learned for 50 years. And why can a period of refining qi be transformed into a divine skill method? Gu Ziche nodded. "It's easy, like drinking water. I wanted to do it, so I did it. I have been thinking about it all this time, and I believe it's because our cultivation methods are different. For example, in Wolf's Head Wave, it emphasizes the use of one's own spiritual energy for attacks, at most the difference between the more exquisite control of spiritual energy and the more delicate meridians it passes through. For example, in the mind technique I just watched, it emphasizes the extraction of spiritual energy from nature to exercise one's body and store it in the body. It even teaches people to open up spiritual pools and spiritual seas in the elixir field to contain spiritual energy, increase the storage of spiritual energy, and even more so, to open up small worlds in the body." The old man naturally said, "Otherwise." Gu Ziche shook his head and lifted it casually, dissipating all of his spiritual energy. The old man was surprised to find that in his eyes, Gu Ziche had completely become immortal. And in the next moment, he took a deep breath and became the 10th layer of qi refining again. Why? Why is your cultivation level? I don't agree with the so-called division of refining qi into one layer and refining qi into two layers, Gu Ziche said. I can probably guess that you rely on your body's spiritual energy capacity to determine your cultivation level. You can store this bit of spiritual energy during the refining phase, more during the foundation building phase, and more during the golden elixir phase. But for me, this is not the right path. I do not intercept the power of heaven and earth for my own use, nor do I steal the spiritual energy of heaven and earth for my own small world. When I use my moves, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is helping me. When I meditate quietly, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth returns to heaven and earth. Gu Ziche calmly said, it is precisely because I do not possess them, but can have them. Do you understand? I don't understand, the old man said. As a Buddhist, one cannot go away, as it does not compete, the world cannot compete with it. All of them are written in the book I have given you. Gu Ziche said, the main idea is that because I do not contribute, the credit will not leave, and because I do not compete, no one in the world can compete with me. The same goes for the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. I do not want to selfishly possess them, and they will not leave me. I am to the spiritual energy, just like water droplets are to the sea. They are one with me, and they do not distinguish between the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Therefore, I can be a layer of refining energy, or a layer of refining energy. 10 layers of qi, it's all the same. An unprecedented theory, the old man whispered. This theory goes far beyond his past understanding. If someone else said this to him with empty words and white teeth, he would definitely not agree, but Gu Ziche, this living example, is in front of him, and he can't say it's impossible. I have been taught since I was young that cultivators fight against humans and the heavens and the earth, going against the heavens. Even if there are countless thunder and tribulations, I will not change my appearance. I will fight alone in the world and respect myself. The old man said seriously, I have never heard of such a theory. If I give someone an adventure, then I will lose it. If I give someone else the treasure, then I will not be killed. Gu Ziche nodded and said, from a human perspective, of course, because the total amount of matter in the universe is constant, everything is a zero-sum game. The more I have, the less you will be. Therefore, people should try their best to seize treasures, strengthen themselves, and surpass 10,000. But from the perspective of heaven, that's not the case. Although I'm not very familiar with the current situation, I think no one can truly become a Taoist. The way of heaven is to make up for the deficiency when there is excess. The way of man is not enough to make up for the excess when there is loss. The way of heaven is fair and just, reducing what is surplus and providing what is insufficient. The way of human beings is selfish, damaging what is insufficient and providing what is surplus. People can naturally walk on the path, but if they do so, they will never become the path. Gu Ziche said, no matter how strong they are like a burglar who forcibly empties the money and appliances in the house. Even though I am weak, I still enjoy a beam of sunshine inside the house. Gu Ziche looked at the old man's still confused and conflicted face and said softly, I know you haven't understood or can't accept it yet, so let me demonstrate it to you on sight. He is preparing to lay a golden pill in front of the old man. Gu Ziche was already able to form the golden elixir. From the perspective of Taoism 5,000 years ago, he first comprehended the spiritual energy of heaven and earth through the process of breathing and merging with them. Moreover, because he was still the body of Yuanyang, his mood had also slightly improved, and the requirement of building a foundation had long been met. Next, he could only form the golden elixir. It has nothing to do with the so-called 1 to 10 layers of qi refining in the cultivation world, as well as the great fullness in the early, middle, and later stages of foundation building. The traditional Taoist theory is that once the state of mind cultivation is reached, one can proceed to the next step, without any hierarchy. Gu Ziche was well aware that for an elderly person with a power-first mindset, convincing him not to rely on big principles, but to rely on real strength to improve, so he prepared to perform a qi refining jumping gold pill live. This is not a big deal for him. In his era, many old Taoist practitioners who had been practicing for many years had no spiritual energy from heaven and earth, and could directly form golden pills. However, for people in this era, it is far beyond common sense. The old man lifted his head and saw Gu Ziche sitting cross-legged, silently reciting the Tai Shang Lao Jun talks about the Heart Sutra, once, calming his mind. Then, his whole body emitted light and he began to silently recite another secret book that the old man had never heard of. 1 transformation for reducing Dan, 2 transformations for copulation, 3 transformations for nourishing Yang, 4 transformations for nourishing Yin, 5 transformations for bone, 6 transformations for meat, 7 transformations for 5 organs and 6 organs, 8 transformations for nurturing fire, and 9 transformations for soaring. The secret of the 9 transformations of the golden elixir, also known as the secret of the 9 transformations of the golden elixir, is passed down by Mr. Naiwen Chen Puchuan. Today, become a golden pill. The old man in the period of transforming his spirit stared blankly at the young man in front of him. Although he was only about to form a golden pill, it seemed to shatter his past few hundred years of values. There is no great roundness in the front, middle, and later stages of the first and second floors, it's just natural. The so-called. The power of one turn is like a precious pearl, penetrating the spiritual body of the mountains, rivers, and universe. Under the leaves of the red lotus lies a hidden alchemy, while the red water flows through the 9 seasons pearl. Also said. The two transformations of yang lead to the formation of yin, and the combination of kidney, light, heart, and fluid leads to the formation of ding-ren. The divine pearl rushes back to the East China Sea with lightning, and bursts with spiritual light illuminating the purple gold. The surging spiritual energy poured in from the outside, layer by layer penetrating the orifices and flowing flexibly within Gu Zish's body without any obstruction or barrier. The old man stared blankly at this unprecedented breakthrough, witnessing countless people forming the golden elixir in his past years. All of them mobilized the spiritual energy in his own elixir field to impact the acupoints. If the force was too strong, there would be hidden injuries, and if the force was too small, it would not be possible to open the acupoints. If the accumulation was insufficient or the mental method was too weak, it was possible that the spiritual energy would be exhausted and not be able to open the acupoints, ultimately leading to failure or the low grade of the golden elixir. Where have you ever seen such a thing? He doesn't have any spiritual energy on his body, but all the spiritual energy around him rushes in, competing to open up his orifices. The so-called 3 turns of yang enter the left palace, and the color of the Xianzhu fetus gradually turns bright red. The yin of the 4 transformations enters the right pass, and the holy child's spiritual fortune sends a rosy complexion. The 5 transformations of yin and yang are formed, and babies are filled with the essence of yang. 6 turns of dantian, playing with the moonlight, transforming the fetus, soul, and shadow into hidden credit. Turning around 7 times and flying 4 times, the body is light, and the spiritual light is closed and breathing throughout the alchemy city. The 8 transformations return to the yuan zone sagging, and the circumferential fetal breath nourishes babies. At this moment, Gu Zish's body and acupoints were fully opened. When he looked inside, the acupoints around his body were like the 9 heavens Huaqi, with meridians like belts, bones like precious jade, blood like lead and mercury, and pure yang internal alchemy. Black and red qi gushed out from his nose. But lonely yang is not long, he still has one last step. Mr. Naiwan once said. 9 turns of carefree path with complete fruits, and 3,000 martial arts moves to become immortals. Golden books and jade slips proclaim imperial edicts, tiptoeing with auspicious clouds to pay homage to the 9 heavens. 9 transformations turn into gold. Yu reads books. www.yuyukeangshu.net, seamlessly integrated, yin and yang complement each other, and the Tao fruit becomes perfect. Gu Zish slowly opened his eyes, and a faint flash of light illuminated the room for a moment. In the inner view, a golden pill is suspended in the elixir field, with 9 patterns on top. However, unlike the usual elixir patterns, 2 of them are interwoven in a cross shape in the center, while the other 3 are drawn on the top, left, and right, each missing a square below. The last 4 are located at the 4 corners, folding into strange patterns. It is the image of Luo Shu. This is like a dragon-shaped star chart circling around the pattern of Ziwei Tianji in the center, gradually evolving into the yin-yang Tai Chi chart and Bagua over the next 5,000 years. 5,000 and 5,000, 10,000 years later, the Book of Luo was once again inscribed on the golden elixir. Gu Zish slowly stood up, and during the process of forming the golden elixir, he once again realized many things, many of which he had not yet figured out. When the elixir turned 9 times and the Luo book was engraved, he completely understood. Perhaps it is also a realization of the significance of his coming here. At that time, he looked up in confusion and caught a glimpse of a corner of the fairy mountain, so he asked. What is immortality? A majestic voice replied, holding the heavenly way is immortality, immortality is immortality, Lingran Jiutian is immortality, transcending things is immortality, unrestrained is immortality, carefree is immortality, flipping hands is clouds is immortality, covering hands is rain is immortality, heaven and earth are inhumane are immortality, and horizontally pressing the current world is immortality. He said, wrong. He said, in ancient times, those who had the way gave birth to all things without taking credit, nurtured all things without possessing them, educated all things without arrogance, and were good at benefiting all things without competing. Immortals are almost like the Tao, so. The most good and benevolent are immortals, the most noble and holy are immortals, giving without accumulating is immortality, mixing with foolishness is immortality, nurturing sentient beings is immortality, and benefiting all things is immortality. This is my Cultivation. Chapter 10. Covering the Sky. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The iron-gray small boat jumped out of the subspace in a disheveled manner, covered in scars. The house leak happened to be caused by continuous night rain, and the navigation in the subspace was not very smooth. We encountered a rare subspace storm, and the ship was severely damaged, even almost lost its direction. They originally wanted to stay in the subspace for a while longer to avoid pursuit, but this ship was originally meant for commemoration, and all the repair materials were on the bombed destroyer. Therefore, if they don't dock for repairs, they may have all fallen into the subspace. The frigate wobbled out of the subspace, started its sub-light speed engine, and flew towards the landfill star field. There are few people going there, there is no surveillance, and there is a large amount of scrap metal that can be used, making it a good supply area. But limited by their extremely limited level of knowledge, they were not aware that the tracking beacon had already been set off on the spacecraft. These pirates, who had never studied before, had limited knowledge in technology to piloting the spacecraft. Thousands of light-years away, the wandering Afterglow pirate group received a signal and entered the Stargate in a grand manner, leaping to an area only 200 light-years away from the target, and then embarked on a superluminal voyage, which could be reached in just 20 hours. At this moment, in the star field of the landfill, the gatekeeper was diligently reading Gu Ziche's translated Tao Te Ching, frowning and contemplating the principles behind it. He didn't want to read such a difficult book, but seeing Gu Ziche transition from the Qi refining stage to the golden elixir stage with a snap, he felt that even if it was difficult to understand, he needed to understand it. It is not out of the pursuit of the Tao, but out of the desire of the lower-class people for progress. The old man comes from a decent family, and his parents are a relatively retro fairy couple. In this era where there are no children, he still wants a child to witness their love. According to legal requirements, Xuanmu Education collected their genes and successfully synthesized a new child in the laboratory. Based on the newborn level 4 package they purchased, they injected the child with genes such as intermediate palm technique talent, intermediate escape technique talent, high-quality water spirit root, and guaranteed scattered immortal talent. According to the 3-year-old foundation building package purchased by this couple, they are placed in a culture room from the embryonic stage, and start refining qi from the fertilized egg. At the age of 1, they reach the 10th level of refining qi, and successfully break through the foundation building period at the age of 3. If there were no setbacks, he would start studying at the school of Xuanmu Education from the age of 3 until he reached the Mahayana period or was over 30 years old. Then he would find an ordinary job, work in an ordinary way, and be promoted to a wandering immortal without any danger. He would receive a promotion and work like this for thousands of years before simply dying. But fate didn't even want to give him such a life. Just as he left the training room at the age of 3, there was bad news. The Blink-1 star, where his parents were located, was directly shattered by the cross-galactic energy rays of the Alpha civilization in a retaliatory action, transforming into countless asteroids and becoming a brand new meteorite belt in the stellar system. On the night of receiving the news, Xuanmu Education kicked all the children whose relatives were on that planet and could not afford to pay, out of the training room and school, and even some of the children were still in an embryo or fertilized egg state. The elderly belong to the relatively lucky group. They are 3 years old, and the construction period has provided them with wisdom and learning ability no less than adults. He ran to a poor area and stole with his own strength during the construction period. Although he may be caught, people often only beat him up for the sake of being only 3 or 4 years old, and will not kill him. He has no name, and people who have been stolen call him Little Thief, so he casually gave himself a surname, called Hong Little Thief. Gradually, as he grew up, the only thing he knew was to become stronger. He has not received any education in cultivating immortality and has no cultivation techniques. He steals, and deceives. One book of martial arts, one book of secret scripts, he survived through the cracks, grew up through hardships, and gained some fame in the impoverished areas during his infancy. Known as the Heavenly Ghost Hand Hong Xiao Thief. Of course, covering the sky cannot cover the sky, and ghost hands have nothing to do with ghosts. It just sounds very powerful and can scare people. Later, I heard that someone in the slum had offended a big shot, and the big shot said he needed to clean the floor. So a torrent of neutrons came, and people below the primordial stage all died in howling. So the cultivators came with swords, capturing people from the primordial stage and above, dismantling their spiritual roots for newborns, integrating their brains into an optical brain array, and dismantling the remaining flesh and blood into material resources. The sky was covered with spaceships and immortals, blocking the light of the stars, and the ghostly hands fled in a panic. In the end, he and a few well-played brothers snatched a small frigate and jumped into the subspace while the enemy was unprepared. They don't know how to pilot spaceships and can only wander around there. The purple electric sword immortal was captured by unknown creatures, leaving only his clothes. The rock giant spirit was swept out of the cabin by turbulence, and the water light fairy was directly killed by a subspace storm. However, they are a bit luckier than the others in the slums, at least in the memory of the elderly, they still have the arrogant titles and figures of their youth. After a long, long time, when there were only 3 of them left, they were swept out of the subspace by a storm and landed in a quiet star field. At that time, the garbage star was only filled to the 21st, and now there are over 300 garbage planets. They landed on the garbage star number 19, where a group of struggling survivors kindly helped them repair the spaceship and accepted them. At that time, the 7 great ancestors did not prohibit people from living on the garbage planet, and there were also some small factories that recycled and sold the discarded garbage to earn meager profits. The old man lived there for 100 years, from the arrogant young thief to the radiation-eroded elderly man, gradually becoming a deity. The other 2 people who came here together, soul-devouring demon lord and white dancing dragon immortal, failed to break through the period of deification and transformed into flesh tumor monsters in the radiation, before being killed by the old man himself. At that time, he would still hold the ugly head of his companions and cry loudly. A person cannot pilot the frigate they stole, and he is also old and unable to fly. Therefore, he raised 5 children and handed over the frigate to them. Later, Yi Jie, who was quick-witted and fierce, was just a rebellious girl who liked to pull his beard. Later, the nearby sects declared that the discarded garbage also belonged to private property, and was sacred and inviolable, so they dumped everyone into space. Yu reading www.yuyukangshu.net. Most people die in the helpless space, being gradually evaporated by the stars to dry up their water and blood, listening to their bodily fluids gradually drying up in their blood vessels. In the dark star sea tomb, they face a lonely and humble death. 5 children successfully escaped while piloting a frigate, but the old man did not leave. He was old and didn't want to run anymore. At that time, he would no longer cry. But he didn't die either. He was buried under the ruins of the factory and not found. Later on, he continued to sit there, and when the children grew up, they built a hidden device there to prevent the elderly from being discovered. Occasionally, if they catch someone, they will throw them to the elderly to pick up garbage and earn a little money, which can be considered as giving these people a job. The old man was right at the time, even such a job could be considered happiness in the eyes of many people. Most people will die from radiation, just like his brothers who did not become Yuaning back then. A very small portion of those who are fortunate enough to be promoted to become gods will join Yi Jie's pirate group. Over 100 years have passed like this. He is old and will no longer claim to be a ghost hand covering the sky. When others ask for his name, they say he is called a gatekeeper. But Gu Zish's appearance seemed like a beam of light. Unprecedented martial arts, miraculous rapid advancement, not as clean as people of this era. The old man's stubborn mind, although unwilling to admit it, did realize that he might live for a while longer. He held the Tao Te Ching and read it with all his might, just like when he was a child looking up a dictionary or using a street lamp to read stolen palm techniques. Maybe I'll be promoted to the refining stage. Learn. Learn to death. The old man looked at the book as if he was reading a beam of light.